Hello, everybody, and welcome to CONSERVATISH episode 209. My name is Peter Edgar Feliciano. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you share this, rate it, review it. Remember, I am half Puerto Rican, so if you don't do those things, you're a racist. I just like doing it. I have to. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano or at my backup at CONSERVATISH. And you can Twitter at Rule62Peter, and you can support my podcast and my music at patreon.com/conservatish. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Tom Amenta. Yay!
What's up?
Thank you so much. It is a joy. It is an honor. It is a privilege, sir, to have you join us. Please introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And as I was saying before we started recording, you have the greatest podcast name, period. I work in sales and marketing in the day job, and I got super jealous when I saw that, because I was like, damn it, I wish I had thought about that one.
It's a good one.
But like you said, my name's Tom Amenta. I'm one of the authors of the new book, The 20-Year War, which is a photojournal chronicling 71 different veterans' journeys. First, what inspired them to join, a brief sketch of their service, what their transition was like, and then what they're doing now to continue to serve the United States, the greatest nation in the world, which is how you found me. Actually, I think it was our publicist being like, please talk to this guy. He doesn't entirely suck. So I'm going to try and live up to that. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on the day. Let's be real about it.
Right.
But no, I enlisted on my 18th birthday into the Army on a Ranger contract, was in the 75th Ranger Regiment for 5 years. From there, went to school at the University of Illinois, and lived up to the absolute maxim of your podcast name of CONSERVATIVISH, where I found a way to somehow piss off all the liberals, get kicked out of class a whole bunch, if you want to have some stories on that one, and a whole bunch of the conservatives for not holding the line enough. From there, I was one of the founders of the military lifestyle apparel company Ranger Up in 2008. Did that for a while. Left Ranger Up just honestly right after we did the movie Range 15, which, to this day, I'm still amazed somehow hasn't been canceled out of everything. When you're in the writing room of something and your one rule is that you will not make fun of people who are mentally handicapped because they can't defend themselves. Everything else is fair game. And then you live to it, with some veteran humor. We're the first fully funded veteran Hollywood production. From there, did some business development, sales, and safety and security. Got a little burnt out, sold my stake in Ranger Up, and then I actually went and ultralight backpacked all the way around the world.
Amazing.
Flew from Chicago to Lisbon, Portugal. About 5 months later, I flew back from Tokyo, Japan. And then, since then, I'm a sales and marketing person by trade. So, been bouncing around doing all that. And I currently live in Omaha, Nebraska.
Right.
So right over state.
Right. And there's a lot I want to unpack with that, but especially I appreciate the recent interviews and the research that I've done regarding your work talking about the Biden administration botching the run from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I think just to give some backstory to it. So you enlisted in 2002. What was your experience? Was it 2000? Was it September?
Actually. I enlisted in 99. So it was before that. I am the oldest of four. And I was a punk ass teenager. And I knew that if I went to college, I was not going to graduate and I was just going to screw off. So the other thing is that my sisters were super diligent students, and they were right after me. One of them graduated summa cum laude. One of them graduated magna cum laude. Both of them have master's degrees with honors. That's their ish. And then my little brother is the same way, who gave me on then. So it's well, the parents don't already have a ton of cash for this. I need to grow up. I wanted some adventure in my life. And I'm like, well, my great uncle had been in special forces in Vietnam. And I'm like, Uncle Ralph, what do I do? It's like, well, Tommy, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to shoot automatic weapons. And I want to blow shit up. He goes, you need to be a Ranger. And so enlisted with that contract. Actually on 9/11, I was in Germany getting ready to go out on a training exercise.
Okay, so you are already in the services.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing was, I didn't actually see the towers come down for a week. Because we didn't have a CNN upload. I mean, this is 2001, where it's a smartphone is a BlackBerry, right? And even then, it's a barely, if you want to call it that. So we went out, we did the training mission, and we knew, we were hearing stuff on the radio and everything, and we're just literally my platoon leader had spent 7 years in Delta Force. before he'd become, our officer. And he just got us all in formation. He goes, men, now it's real. That was it. Like, just walked away. And so we go out there and we're just like smashing the OPT4 and we're going after it. And it's like 5:36 in the morning. It's just, we're dead tired, night mission, just camo, just smearing all over our faces and everything like that. And we walk into the chow hall, and at that point they gotten CNN International up. And this is where now it's a week later. So everyone's been desensitized to these images. So as they're talking, just every 30, 45 seconds, just another smash. So, at that point, the Ranger Regiment hadn't done anything since Somalia. And so the Second Ranger Battalion, which I was a part of, hadn't done anything since Panama in 1989.
Right.
And suddenly, like we always would joke that we're an all-star, all-pro football team practicing all the time and never getting to play the game.
Right, on the bench.
Right, and we know it's coming, and we know that that's what we're going to be doing. And suddenly, to see the thing that's caused this, and to see it over and over and over, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like the first week that, I saw the news stories later in some of the classes that I actually took at the University of Illinois. One of them that I took was the media and politics. And 9/11 was really prominent. So it was really interesting about how there's sensitivity and how it sort of goes away. And media theory and things like that. Mm. And so all you do is just feel these 200 dudes just already mad. We were already mad. We were already ready to go. And suddenly it was the most palpable emotion I've ever felt in my life, because we were all because we were in Germany. We thought we were going right away. We're like, man, just mail us our desert uniforms. We're going to go fuck these guys up. We are going to fucking kill someone.
Right.
And ultimately, we had to go back to Fort Lewis, Washington. They made the decision, said 3rd Ranger Battalion. They jumped into Objective Rhino, and along with the horse soldiers, kicked it off. So my first combat tour was in 2002. I was actually one of the first members of 2nd Ranger Battalion to step off a plane into a theater of war since Panama, like I mentioned. And then I had another tour in 2004, got out, and then I spent 9 years in the National Guard actually teaching and training infantry combat tactics, which was you want to talk about a weird sort of look in on things like that. I'd have guys that would go through my infantry training course. They'd spend 2.5 weeks in what's supposed to be an 8-week course if you're going through it normally in basic, and 36 hours later, those guys were in Kuwait. 24 hours after that, they were in Iraq.
Jesus.
You want to talk about, if you take your job seriously, which we all did as instructors, pressure. It's I have 2.5 weeks to teach skills. Some of these guys were small boat mechanics that have been doing the job for 12 years in the National Guard. Literally, one of them was some obscure boat, small, outboard motor boat mechanic, was actually an MOS. None of us had heard of it. We're making him explain it to us, because we'd always ask them what they were, or they were commo, or they soft skills, all these different things. And now we got to turn them into infantry.
Right.
Congratulations, you're going to Iraq. You're running IED patrols on Route Irish. Good luck.
Now that pull, was it from the top down? Could you feel it, or was it everybody just wanting? Was it the enthusiasm of the men that you were training? Did that factor into it?
So I would say there was a mixed bag. So I started doing that in 2004, and I would say the first 2 to 3 years from 2004 to 2007, everyone was we're going to go just wreck something, right? Mm-hmm. And then you started seeing the surge, especially in Iraq. So the theater war shifted from Afghanistan, which had a very clear purpose, and we're we know exactly why we were there. We know exactly what we're doing, exactly how we're doing it. To Iraq, we're what are we doing again? Right? Why are we here? And so you would see some of the guys that their unit, they were just bodies, they were just numbers. We actually had at one point where I think it was the second year we were doing it, that we were just failing people out, because it was me, another guy from 2nd Ranger Battalion, or from 3rd Ranger Battalion, who were in the Guard, and then our boss, who just held the line. He was just, I say all the time, the greatest soldiers I've ever served with were in the National Guard, and the absolute worst that I've served with the National Guard. There's no real middle ground either. They're super committed. And when you think about, especially now in a time of war, all the bullshit you have to go through to serve, right? You're going to deploy. You're going to you can only half do your real job, and you kind of only half do the soldier thing. So you somehow got to, balance it out, and you still got a family, and you still got a life. To do that is just an incredible commitment. But then also you have the guys that just wanted to wear a uniform and look tactical, and it was the best or the worst. And you really saw that through our course. You saw the guys that were just told that they were numbers, and that was just what they had to do because they got caught up in it. And then you had people that were really, I had one kid who was 24, 25. His unit hated him. They thought he was a pain in the ass. He comes into our course, learns everything about infantry, does really, really well on their final spin up. because they're from Tennessee. They're at Fort Campbell. They're doing an urban training thing. They purposely killed all the leadership. It's called a private led patrol. Like you do that.
Okay.
It's a common tactic to sort of assess.
Right.
So like they take all the leadership off the board right away.
Right.
Caleb just like, let's go, boys. They go through and they win the exercise. Like he inspires like all of like the E4s and below, gets them all together. They go through, they wreck shop and they beat the O4. His battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel, calls me. He's like, direct words out of his mouth, what the fuck did you teach these guys? How the fuck did this happen? I'm like, and he's like, listen, we were trying to figure out how to bring this kid. Now I'm about ready to make him a squad leader. I'm like, sir, I don't mean to like be insulting, but it's really simple. It's the basics. Battle drills, learn how to make a decision, and violence of action, because I had 2.5 weeks. That's all we got.
Right. And plus you and me are an example of like, not necessarily, okay, some people have, I always call it like super friends.
Right.
You're not going to ask Superman to talk to dolphins, and you're not going to ask Aquaman to scale tall buildings in a single bound. Yeah. Everybody, so your siblings, they're all the, whatever. So ne'er-do-wells have a strength as well. Yep. You just got to access it. So maybe that was his access. It's like, okay, we're going to give you this responsibility, and we'll see what you show up. All of a sudden, boom, Spirit shows up, and he did what he needed to do.
And he ended up, like, once they saw that, once they realized he knew what he was doing, but like both you and I can tell already from the 10 minutes we've been talking, so you can't see it on the plaque behind me. That's my leaving the Ranger Regiment plaque. Normally they say, to Sergeant Amenta from the men of the 75th Ranger Regiment, thank you for your faithful and devoted service. Mine says better a smartass than a dumbass on it.
Yeah.
So like, that was his Caleb. Like once they unlocked that, the better a smartass than a dumbass, when he thrived. And like he crushed it. He went overseas and just killed it. Just absolutely, suddenly went from the worst to the best, ended up was a squad leader by the time he got done. Like just, great dude. And that, so, did that stuff and, yeah, man. But I mean, I don't know. You mentioned the Biden administration. I can't wait to get into that because I am not conservative-ish on this one. I'm pretty anti the idiot and cheat. Well,
well, yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. First things first, it's conservatish. How dare you? Sorry. But I know English is not your first language.
You can hear Bill. I can barely speak grunt. Okay. Like,
I want to quick dip into the transition the transition from Afghanistan, because you talked about the main goal of us being in Afghanistan, get bin Laden. Right. Am I correct in that?
100%.
What were you told was the transition over to Iraq? What was the goals in mind there?
So that was really weird. So you've got to remember, like my platoon leader at the time had spent 7 years in Delta. We, being in a special operations, you just hear random, like sort of like tidbits and gossipy, you're not sure, like bullshit. And I'll never forget, we were actually in Afghanistan in 2002. And my platoon leader, who I'll keep his name out of it for the sake of it, like we're sitting around and we're all like talking, like we're going to get bin Laden, whatever. And, he just looks and shrugs his shoulders. He goes, yeah, we'll be back in Iraq in like a year. And we're like, what? And he goes, there's no way on earth that this administration doesn't finish the war that his dad starts. We'll be back. And that's all he said.
Yeah.
And, I mean, again, like this is a dude that's got a whole bunch of, at that point he had been in for like 13, 14 years. Like he'd been in the Ranger Regiment. He'd been Ranger Recon, which is also a tier 1 unit. Then he'd been in another tier 1 unit in Delta. So it's like, I don't know how he arrived at that, but he said it so casually too. Cause I was his radio operator. So I was around him a lot. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And then, sure enough, you start seeing it and you start going. And at this point, like, I don't think there's never been sort of a cogent theory, right? On all of that, or people like go back and forth. One of the things that a friend of mine who's actually, he is both an extremely, extremely accomplished entrepreneur and an amazing finance guy. Like this, I don't know what his bank account has for crypto, but he was one of the people that was buying and mining Bitcoin before anyone else knew what it was. And like, what? Like,
yeah.
The high-end supercar that he bought himself because Bitcoin crossed 60,000, he sold enough to sold like 2 coins to buy, or 3 coins or whatever to buy it. Was just like, he's that guy. But he's a genius, like whatever. Him and I were having a conversation. God, this was 10 years ago. and he also does like he consults for the Navy on some other stuff like that. Like he's a true polymath. And we started just sort of BSing. And one of the things that we pointed out was if you look at oil as a commodity that is required for national security, right? And remember, Cheney was the CEO of Halliburton. Like all the Bush family money comes from oil, right? This is entirely speculation between two dudes literally sitting around having an couple excellent glasses of whiskey, right?
Right.
But and I can't do that level of statistical analysis. He can. We started kind of futzing with it, and there's at least a theory that you could posit that by going into Iraq and securing short-term oil interdependence between Kuwait and Iraq that allowed American interests there. And at the same time, because you got to remember, this is also when fracking was really coming online. Now, most people don't realize this, but the number one oil exporter in the world is the United States. Like, go up and look at, like, that's why I think it's just insane that the current administration is like, we're shutting down the pipeline, we're reducing fracking, they're walking and these are policies, by the way, that when he was vice president, the Obama administration completely supported. Like, they're like, yeah, let's go. Because whatever you want to say about climate change, which, just so we're clear, I absolutely believe in. I think that both sides nibble around that issue, but I think it's pretty clear that, something's going on. How long, whatever, I don't know. I'm not that scientist. But when you start looking at it, you start realizing what that conflict did in terms of energy and where we are now compared to where we were in the early 2000s. There's at least a theory that I would put out there that some policymakers and obviously you're never going to put this on the street for PR, right? I mean, like you say something like this, and like that's just like, well, what was it? It was American blood for oil.
Right. They don't even want to let go of the secrets around Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So it's like, again, this was just two dudes, like one really smart finance guy and one person who's also worked in public policy, and someone else who's worked in public policy and he'd been in the military trying to like what if it. But there's a level of a case there, at least in my opinion, where if you want to accept it, because the other thing too is there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They weren't nearly the level that everyone talked about, but 1st Ranger Battalion found some. I know some guys that died from cancer because they were over there. Like, not burn pit. I mean, like they got back home and 6 months later they had pancreatic cancer, right? Which is slow leak. This is not uncommon for some of those things. So, but they just weren't there at the scope and scale that was perpetuated that, Colin Powell claimed at the UN, which to this day, I hate that his name kind of got drugged through. I really believe that what they showed him, he believed, because there's no way Colin Powell. My side note, my great uncle who I'd mentioned earlier actually went to Ranger School with Colin Powell. So I never met him, but like I know enough about him as a person, and I don't believe for a second that he would have gone up there if he didn't believe it until he didn't believe it, right? So, which is why I think he resigned. Now we're like way into conspiracy theories, which is not normally where I.
This is just the tip. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Here we go. But yeah, so I mean. That was, when people ask me about Iraq, that's honestly kind of where I go. It's just because when you think about it, it's like, okay, you don't go, to just settle the score, right? Like, why did we go the first time? We went because it was a threat to international security. If Saddam Hussein takes over Kuwait and then he's knocking on the door of Saudi Arabia, and that's everyone in the world's oil. That's all the world's energy at that time. All right. Then we backed it off. Then he's still a pain in the ass, right? And so if you think that one day he might rise back up, it's at least plausible. It's like if Occam's razor says it's the simplest form of the idea, it at least holds up the Occam's razor test, right? Like, why would you go? So,
and if we had taken away the Taliban more and more, it may have created a vacuum of power that Saddam Hussein.
I mean, Taliban weren't in Iraq, but it's like once you pull. I mean, that was really the biggest problem we had, is that we pulled the Saddam government, we pulled the Fedayeen way too quickly, and then there was a power gap. Like, why were we there that long? It's because we didn't understand the culture. We didn't understand sort of how business works over there. But also the flip side of the coin is that. In the immortal words of the Wu-Tang Clan, cash rules everything around me. Cream get the money, right?
That's right.
And why is Iraq ultimately gone pretty well when it's all said and done? Like, after we learned the lessons, and why is Afghanistan an unmitigated disaster? Well, one has a shit ton of money. One has a shit ton of infrastructure, and a lot of people who care about that infrastructure. So once you find the right smart people that are willing to sort of play ball at the international level, it starts stabilizing. Like, people aren't complicated. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We want a roof over our head. We want clean water. We want to be able to eat. We want to have a little bit of fun in our lives before we die. And as long as you can give that to me, you're really going to have to suck before I whine about it, right? I mean, part of America's problems right now, I'd argue, is American decadence, is we have no perspective of what poor actually is. Like, not to say we can't do better with our version of poverty, but go to Myanmar sometime and, pull out a gangster roll that is literally this thick and it's $50 American. And you know what I'm saying? Like, getting uncomfortable, like you're going to get robbed, and come back and tell me about, some of this, or India, or, some of these other places I've seen in the world. Right. And so, but meanwhile, over in Afghanistan, what do you have? The number one cash crop's opium.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, by a lot. As a matter of fact, Sajid Haqqani, who's the Interior Ministry, who's an actual on the most wanted list for the United States, like on our hit list with a bounty of $10 million on his head before he came an Afghan interim Taliban foreign minister. All true. Right? Like, dude, like when I say I've got smoke for days for the current administration, I've got smoke for days.
Yeah.
You mean it, like, why is that guy the interior minister? Is because when he was living in the tribal region of Pakistan, establishing the Haqqani network of terrorism and narco trafficking, like, he's a smuggler. He's a vicious terrorist smuggler. And how are you going to get the opium money in and out of Afghanistan? Well, of course he's the freaking interior minister. I mean, like, no shit, Sherlock. Right. And you can go down, like, Mullah Omar's son's the defense, the former head of Taliban's the defense minister. Like, you go up and down that government. It's just an HV. It's like, there's literally, I think, oh man, one of my buddies and I did the exercise, and we had to stop, and we found 12 people that, like, 12 out of like the top 20 were like on the HVT list, high value target list, at some point for special operations. Like,
and again, this is in the Afghanistan government.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about from the ground level, top down, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
horribleness.
All the Afghan Afghan Taliban leaders that are currently running that country, like 12 out of the 20 were high value targets that we did at one point. But it's fine. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. Now, at the same time, while this is all going on, you've got troops on the ground. You've got people over there. At what point? Because we're going to transition into the horrible job that Biden did leaving Afghanistan. For how long was that corruption there? And was it what am I trying to get to? Was it like trying to stop the bleeding everywhere?
Yeah.
I mean, what was the experience of the troops on the ground?
I mean, yeah. So the first thing so as a side note, like, my degree is in political science, the focus on international relations in the Middle and the Near East. And the Near East got tacked on because everyone was in Afghanistan, and I went there and I was super interested in it. People don't normally think about the Near East because that's basically Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? Because then you have the subcontinent of India. So it's kind of this weird little thing. When you look at that region, Americans have a really, really hard time of looking at any government that isn't either a democracy or a constitutional republic or like an autocratic, like, dictatorship kingdom, like whatever. Like, if it's anything else, like, we just have a really hard time with it because it's not in our culture. It's not in the evolution of where we got. We take for granted that our government works so well because it's the most inefficient form of government ever devised. Like, Madison was like, well, okay, so this doesn't work at scale because legacy. So rather than the most efficient, which is an autocracy, it is a kingship or a dictatorship, whatever you want to call it. If it works, right? If you have the just leader, like political theory, right? But that doesn't scale. So we're going to do the most inefficient thing, and we are going to make checks and balances, make everybody fight, and through that refiner's fire, we are going to get where we are. Which, if we get there, we can talk about the current administration, the current what Joe Manchin did and everything, and how he actually lived up to that, even though people are crucifying him for it. Everything in Afghanistan is tribal. It's all tribal politics. It's all tribal identity. It's all, so you have your shura, or, your group of local leaders that they all get together and they all sort of like bat it around, right? And either the best idea wins, or if you're the right tribal leader and you have enough might, you can be like, I heard you, I don't care. So there's no.
Now, those tribal leaders, are they elected?
No, I mean, okay. So this again gets complicated. It's like no one gets in and just no. It's a great question. No one just gets in and like vote. There's not like a vote one day, right? Like some tribes might say this is the person. Like if the leader dies, sometimes it's the son, sometimes it's the cousin, sometimes it's the brother. Like there's always that sort of natural capacity for leadership in tribal identity and tribal politics that sort of rises to the top. And like on the chances that doesn't really happen and they end up getting in a fight over it, well, it's like, whether it's a political fight or whether it's, a flat out fight in some cases, like that's sort of like the natural like evolution to it. So, I wouldn't call it democratic. I would call it, sort of oligarchic, where there's a small group of people that might be vying for the control of it. But there's also sort of a pecking order or a hierarchy to it where, for as much as people say that we're not primates, so it's like when you really get enough dudes in a room, it's the same thing as a whole bunch of silverback gorillas, right? Like they might all be roughly the same size, but there's the alpha and then it kind of goes down, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to distill this down, and tribal politics are extremely complicated, extremely intricate. I'm just trying to like baseline this so we can have the conversation.
Perfect.
So, you do, but you also have various levels of strengths. Like if someone's controlling a bigger tribe that has more guns, that has more ammunition, that has more money, that has more access to whether it's the opium cash crop or it's to American influence or Taliban influence, Al-Qaeda influence, depending on where you are, all of that comes to the table. One of the most fascinating things I did at school, and I actually really loved, is that one of my professors, one of the first people to model American military influence in different regions. So if you think of it like a percentage board, okay, typically what he found was that there was almost always a stable 10% of people that were going to hate the Americans no matter what we did. Like you walk in and there's this 10% that's just going to hate us. Then there's this 10% that's going to love us, okay, because it's all tied to their economic survival, whatever interests that they have. But what was interesting, and this was a super complicated mathematical / social science model that, it was cool that I got to be, someone to look at, was what we did and how we did it and how it was perceived by those different tribal groups. Because in Afghanistan, you got the Pashtus that are dominant. You have a couple of sub-Pashtu tribes. Then you have the Tajiks, you have the Uzbeks that are the small, like Northern Alliance tribes, Panjshir Valley, things like that. And then you have other like minority tribes that are all around that area. So you have those influences as well. So depending on what village or group of villages you're in, it sort of changes that game board. And then it's what we do. It's like, it's almost like, I don't want to make this way too simplistic, but it's almost like the old game Oregon Trail in a slightly different way, where it's like you make a decision and that decision has consequence, so it's like we built an irrigation channel. Yay, 5% like us. We accidentally shot a kid. 15% hate us. Right?
I just love that.
It's super simple. I'm oversimplifying this, but really, like there is a way, complicated algorithmically, to put all these factors together and start figuring stuff like that out.
Right.
And so that was amazing. But even some of the things that we did. Okay, here's a great example of Western projectionism. And we were joking about canceling earlier, and I'm risking getting myself canceled, and I just don't care because, like, it's the truth. Western projectionism on an area. Girls' schools. Okay, the Taliban said emphatically, we will not educate girls. We will not educate women past 8 years old. They belong in the house. They are baby making factories. They can read the Quran if they figure it out, and that's it, right? We come in and we're like, nah, fam, equal opportunity. Like, and let's be really clear, like in a completely educated populace, whether you're male or female, is absolutely something that is required, and history is borne it out. If you want a successful, growing, vibrant, like you have to have that. Right. Okay. But where we came in with our own biases and our own assumptions is that if we did this in every region, it's going to be a net gain for us. Whereas if we were in an area that was super deeply Taliban influenced and super ardently conservative Muslim in their religious practice, and they're, they weren't in the city, they're way out in, tribal regions, Korangal, things like that. Our projection of Westernism was actually a net detraction. Yes, it helped with something. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, maybe we gained like 3 or 4 percentage points to our good, but we lost 7 or 8 points over here because we didn't have the sensitivity to live up to the maximum of slow, smooth, and smooth is fast. Like, you know, and this is, and you get into different tribal things over there where it's like, just because, you know, you said we can like go all the way to the end. It's like, do you know what a chai boy is?
No.
Okay. Like I'm warning you, this is graphic and this is gross and this is disgusting, but this is a reality that you had to deal with on the board.
Oh, you're talking about bachabazi?
So
what that is?
What a chai boy is it's a boy 10 to 13 who's usually like the aide to one of like the more powerful people, and really he's just his sex thing. Like there's nothing comfortable. So it's uncomfortable, and as a Westerner, it's like super gross and super uncomfortable that they think that it's just okay to like, you know, have sex with boys. But that's a very common thing, especially in rural Afghanistan. Like that's not really in the cities, but the farther you go out, you know, and it's just there. And it's just one of those things where it's like, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, whether you want to accept or unaccept, that's the culture. Okay. Right. In 2002, we were in the middle of nowhere. And at one point, to seal the deal, like the elder is like, okay, we just gave you a whole bunch of money through the CIA to like help us and all this other stuff. And he's like trying to make a present of this child to us. And we're all like, we're all married or engaged or like, you know, like, no, I'm serious.
Jesus Christ.
You can't, you know, and it's like in our families, like in our culture, like we have to take, that's how we have these, you know,
right.
You know, and it's,
but you had to say it in a culturally sensitive way. You couldn't just be like, yeah, we don't fuck boys. Sorry. You know, you had to, right.
You know, it's one of those things. So it's like, you know, and then you get this Western revulsion. Like I will never forget, just because we were talking about like the left and the right. It's like, I'll never forget. Like there was this one girl when I was like my junior year at Illinois, like 15 years ago. She's like, I can't believe that you guys didn't stand up to that. And you guys, and I just looked at it, I'm like, so what? I'm going to offend the local tribal elder and his 3,000 person militia and get shot at for the rest of the time that I'm there because I want to project my Western ideal of culture on him. It's like, well, you like, what, lady, there's 60 of us. There's 3,000 of them. Okay, like you want to forget everything else. Like there's just pragmatism where it's like, you know, I love the especially with the rise of social media, especially Twitter. I love the motherfucker that talks all this shit that wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight because they have no idea. Like, oh, you're gonna like, it's like the John Wick poster where all the guns are pointed. Like, oh, you aren't doing a goddamn thing other than shutting the fuck up. Okay, you are not like. I'm sorry, I love Rage Against the Machine as a band. Great, fantastic music. Like
I talk mad shit about them on this show, so you are welcome.
I mean,
please.
I'm like, I am all here for like all like just like jamming out when I need to. Y'all motherfuckers are not the monk that's going to light himself on fire to protest Vietnam like they put on the cover photo. Okay, you are not that person. Sorry, not sorry about it. So. You know, you did. There was always this case, and I think you saw it a lot later after we got Osama bin Laden. You have to understand where you are. You have to understand, like, you can call it compromise, you can call it pragmatism, you can call it assessing the situation on the ground. But it's like their culture is just different. They operate on a different level. They've been doing this the entire way. And let's go all the way back for a second. The only Western power that has ever, quote unquote, conquered or reined in or successfully done anything in Afghanistan was Alexander the Great. You want to know how he did it? He married into half the families. Part of the reason the Pashtuns are the primary thing, and he committed genocide against the other ones. Now, I think we can all agree genocide's a bad idea. I think we can all agree that if you get a whole bunch of Americans or you know, Canadians or Brits or Aussies marrying in, like, we've got a whole new set of problems, right? Like, I am not advocating the Alexander the Great strategy. But let's also look at take an honest, basic interpretation of history and read it. Like, did the English do it when they tried to conquer Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India? Nope. Did the Soviets do it with or without our influence? Nope. Did, you know, where we weren't really trying to conquer, we were trying to Westernize. I think that's a fair way to put it.
Right.
Did we do it? Nope. Sure didn't, because we never fully understood what motivates this area that's incredibly poor. I mean, this is one of those things that I'm so actually infuriated with the Biden administration right now, especially in the after effects. We can talk about like how we got here, but like one thing is like right now, this second, the UN and all of like the major world think tanks are in agreement. They estimate that if they don't start getting a ridiculous amount of like money and cash into Afghanistan, Taliban, whatever, the estimate is that up to 97% of the population will be below the poverty line by the end of Q1 2022. That's how poor the country is. Okay, that's how lack of infrastructure. Despite what we tried to do, despite like that's what it is. Now there's a ton of corruption. There's all the things that you'd expect when you have like the tribal identities I talked about, right? Where it's like, how can you? It's kind of Games of Thrones. If you really want to, like,
say it again. It's kind of what?
Kind of like Game of Thrones. Like everyone's jockeying for position and all that other stuff. And Taliban's the dominant power in the region, and there's certainly people on the come up and all that other stuff. Like, but 97% of the population, there are, like, the stories are out there, and Americans just kind of shrug their shoulders, but there are literally families right now selling their 12 and 13-year-old daughters to rich people for money to buy food. And as all the faux social media activism is going off about that, when you take a step back, part of the reason they're doing it is, one, they don't want to die from starvation, but two, they know that child, and they're a child, is actually going to keep eating. Right. Can you imagine? I don't have kids, but but can you imagine the choice of, like, I just look at it with my sisters, having to decide if I'm going to, like, sell one of my sisters so the rest of us can eat, but knowing that she'll be hopefully relatively taken care of. Like, that's the choice that these families are making right now in Afghanistan.
And a lot of that was happening in the U.S. in the Great Depression as well, especially in the Appalachian counties. I heard stories about that. Just like, it was, well, we have 12 kids.
Right.
We can only afford to feed none of them. So let's, and this kid is going to have a better life. Like, that's a horrendous decision to make, but it isn't just binary. Like, either you care about children or you don't. It's like, okay, yeah, but, okay. Now,
and that's what's going on right now. And it's like one of those things where we broke it the way we left. We froze their assets, which I didn't necessarily hate at the beginning, but at some point it's like, you keep saying that we're on the right side of history and all this other bullshit. How many people are going to die? Because the winter's there right now. How many people are going to die of starvation and freezing cold in this winter because they don't have anything? And you want to know it?
Yeah. Wait. Can you back up just a little bit? So, where along the timeline and whose assets did we freeze?
So when we withdrew from Afghanistan on the 10th, at the end of August last year. We froze right before we left. We froze in the World Bank and everything when the Taliban took over, all the money in the banks. So there's like $12 billion in frozen assets just sitting there that are just in bank accounts that the Taliban can't access. Now, the Taliban's a terrorist organization. So let's start there. Is it a good idea to give a terrorist organization $12 billion? No, absolutely not. I'm not, for all of you aggregators and everything on social media, I'm not advocating just part and parcel giving the Taliban $12 billion. Okay, Jesus fucking Christ.
Right.
At the same time, there has been little to no real world push to go in to bring them to the table at Doha and say, this is how we are going to use this money for your people. We are basically going to be mom and dad, and we're going to budget you, right? Or we're going to do the things that we can to restrict potential bad influence on this. Like, we're not just going to, like, give it to you, but when we left Afghanistan, the Biden administration, and as the military and the State Department leaves, now it's going to be the non-government agencies and the the world body to go in and help for humanitarian aid. That was this big buzzword, right? When we left it, in the biggest sense, humanitarian aid. But 97% of the population is going to be under the poverty line by March. Yeah, dude.
It kind of sounds like defund the police. Myopic, just whatever is going to get us. Here's the thing, though, from an outsider's perspective who knows no experience of service and things like that, I don't know if it's maliciousness. I don't know if it's malevolence. I think it's maybe more ineptitude. What do you think as far as why he pulled out the way he did?
I think so. So I would say everything after pulling out, I would agree with you. The problem that I have with this administration and why it makes me so fucking angry and why I want to get the biggest, like, as much truth serum as I could possibly pump into this dude and strap him down to the chair and start playing 100 questions with them.
There's going to have to be caffeine in there too, because he's
the tiny little bit of a soul that I have left that isn't like blackened and dark and I will sell it to whomever to make this happen. I mean, whomever. Okay. I am all here for this all day.
Yeah.
And the reason is that the first speech that he gave when he said, we're withdrawing, we're leaving, and all this over the horizon capability bullshit, and, all the way blew up the government aid worker because he was in a white Toyota Camry. By the way, for you and everyone else listening to this, a white Toyota Camry station wagon is the most common car in the developing world. Okay, like literally, that would be like, oh gosh, that would be like a Honda Civic here in the U.S. Oh, they're driving a Honda Civic. Okay, if that's your standard of intelligence, you fucked up. But like he's like over the horizon and everything. Okay, and then he mentions 3 other places: Iraq, Syria, and the Horn of Africa to combat Al-Shabaab. Okay, here's the problem. We have 2,000 troops at the time of that speech. We had 2,000 troops in Iraq. Okay, we had about 750 to 1,000 troops in Syria. Which, by the way, 2 days later, he had to walk back saying we didn't have anyone there because the DoD is like, no, we have people in Syria. The president. I think the line was the president misspoke. Okay. Like when you just gotta like call that one out. Good job, Joe. Right. And then the third one is that the number of troops on the Horn of Africa is a little murky because they just take all of them, put them in AFRICOM, and say this is how many troops we have in the continent of Africa. But the Trump administration planned on closing down Camp Lemon Djibouti, which is right next to Somalia, which is like one of our 2 strategitic bases. I actually just talked to a woman who's so excited because her son's coming back from 11 months at Camp Lemonnier. It never got shut. Like the minute the Biden administration came in, they immediately reversed that policy, which, by the way, I'm super team keeping Camp Lem for a whole bunch of different reasons, but it plays into this. So these 3 other places that we have serious anti-terror strategic concerns, which are well-founded, and we absolutely should have people there, by the way. Mm-hmm. We got troops there. We got, intelligence and training assets, special operations.
Good.
All there to do what needs to get done. But this one other place that happens to have this really buzzy term, which actually, like, we didn't do this with the book on purpose, but it turned into its own sort of, God, what the hell? The 20-year war, the 20-year anniversary, and suddenly we're leaving. Like, you've outlined this plan, but you're not living up to it here. Not only are you not living up to it here, this is the place that every single strategic analysis has said is the most dangerous place for not only a resurgence, but they can hide. That it's so isolated, it's so landlocked, it's so hard to get in and out of. It took the United States almost 4 years to get really proper, truly vetted, and staunch lines of communication in and out of Afghanistan for supply lines.
Wow. Okay.
Because right at the beginning, everything you're doing is flying it in through a C-17. That's not really viable. Like, you had to establish certain overland routes. You had to go look at the map sometime. Of Afghanistan and be like, how am I logistically? That's another problem why it's stayed the way that it is. It's super, super isolated. It's super, super hard to get into. It's landlocked. The Hindu Kush Mountains up to the, really across like the northeast and west are there. The south in Kandahar is like some of the most inhospitable, awful desert the world has ever seen. Like, it's just not an easy place. Okay. It's at elevation. Like, it's complicated. It's a mess. But that's the one place that we're just going to like bounce. It never made any sense. Like, anyone who's had any level of like strategic understanding, who can look at foreign policy, who can look at, sort of anti-terrorism strategy, it's like we were down like 1,500, 2,000 troops, which is about Iraq. Like, it was a really light touch footprint. It made sense. And the other thing you heard all the time is like, well, the forever war. Like, motherfucker, we've had people in Germany since World War II. We've had people in Japan since World War II. We've had troops. Our largest concentration of Okona's troops now, and when that happened, was in fucking Korea. Why? Because we all know what's going to happen when they leave. Because it's actually not only in our interest, in our allies' interest, but the world's interest. It's a strategically viable thing. So 2,000 Americans, which, by the way, we had not had an American death until the 13 Marines, Navy, and Airmen were killed. Before that was over a year. It had been February. Jeez. Okay, so this bullshit notion that was being like propagated and spun, like, look, those men and women certainly were not on a Korea Germany tour. Like, I don't want to paint that picture, but but it's also not like they're sitting on at Bagram Airfield or the operating base that they're on. The base they're not getting shot at every day. Like, right.
A lot of it might have been just presence, culture, while things are being moved, chess pieces are being moved, things like that. And it's
a lot of logistic support from Bagram, because that's the other thing. Everyone was like, oh, well, how did they collapse so fast? We left in the middle of the fucking night from Bagram Airfield. General Scotty Miller, who, by the way, go look that man up. That is a living legend of a badass. Like, just Team Scotty Miller all day. Cases the colors because he's ordered to, doesn't have a proper battlefield handoff because there's security concerns, just gets on a C-17 in the middle of the night and leaves the most important strategic we have in Bagram Airfield, which, by the way, had 2 internationally rated airstrips as opposed to the one in Hamid Karzai International, which is a whole nother problem and clusterfuck when that was in Kabul. So we just leave in the middle of the night, don't explain it to our allies. They're just demoralized. And we were all the logistical support that they had. All the C-17s coming with supplies, all the things to help them prosecute the fight. Now, did we make 1,000,001 fucking mistakes that I mean, I could be on this podcast for 4 hours and just start ticking off shit, right?
Right.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you're going to tell me that our solution to all these problems is just to quit? I mean, literally just leave in the middle of the night. And then we wonder why they're freaking out. Now let's take the other thing. The Taliban was really, really smart when you look at what their battle plan was. They knew we were leaving because the Trump administration had signed that deal and the Biden administration says that they were going to honor it. So they were biding their time. And what they did is they would start in places like Kandahar. They'd start in places like Herat. They already had a natural stronghold, and they'd go out to the smaller provinces where these tribes really run sort of like local governments. Like they say that they're the provincial minister, no, the tribal minister, right? And they'd roll up on them, and they'd be like, yo, here's the deal. You got like 500, 700 dudes. Well, we got 2,000, and we're going to fuck you up. They didn't fight the whole country. They fought these. So it's like, come over to us. Like, we'll take care of you. We're going to do all this. Like, or we're going to get in a gunfight.
Yeah, it's mafia tactics.
No, I mean,
it's like exactly, yeah.
Tribes and gangs, or tribes and mafia, very, very similar sort of ways. That's a perfect way to put it. Like think of the 5 families in New York in their heyday. Right. So what do? They cut the deal. Right. So now that 2,000 is 2,700. So they go to the next one and go, hey, you got 1,200, we got 2,700. Now they come in. So they start gobbling up all the smaller territories and everything. So when we finally do leave and it's go time, they're like, well, we got like 10,000 dudes more, and now suddenly you're going to fight in the city. You're going to fight in Jalalabad. You're going to, all of these things. Suddenly people are like, well, how did it happen so fast? Well, it's like they'd already gobbled up the tiny territories. They'd already, and now it's just scope and scale. So now you've demoralized your allies, right? And now you have the choice again, the gun barrel that I mentioned, where they're literally going door to door with 12 dudes. You can give me your M4 and you work for us, or you and your whole family are getting popped right now. And I'm not exaggerating. That's what was happening.
Right. And who wasn't paying attention to that?
So what's really interesting about that is that, I helped to the best of my ability with sort of the Afghan evac and like all this stuff, like former military guys and NGOs stuff, like on signal and stuff, trying to get people out. What was fascinating to me as I went through that was how the veterans had one piece of the story, right? Because that was our truth. And then talking to these people that had worked through the Red Crescent or the Red Cross or some of these other NGOs that we're talking to, like in the middle of this like panic, holy shit, how do we get people out? And you realize they had another component to it because it was their truth. And then former State Department, and like you started like really stringing this together. And you start seeing where different people had because of those different fractures, like it came into focus really quickly. So my answer to that is, and this is why I've got smoke for all the administrations that since the problem started, is that how the fuck did this not get put together? Like that's ultimately what government's job here is to assess and to put all this together. And it never got put together. Like, I don't know, I think part of that, like, I don't think there was malice. I think this is just human nature. I just think that, you go to you want your truth. Like we were talking about earlier with Westerners, we want all girls educated, which is something I think everyone should be educated. I think that every single person on earth should have a great high quality education because that's the way you move forward in life, right? That's also a very Western idea. Right. That's not a tribal super, and the other thing people like to talk about is almost like, no, it's a lot of tribal identity mixed with they just happen to embrace this religion, right? It's not even just the religion when you really want to pick it all apart.
No, not at all.
And so we're trying to do that. Like we brought our biases, like for all of and I've traveled all the way around the world, Peter. I believe America is the hands down, bar none, greatest nation in the world. We've got our problems, but I am so team US. It's sick.
Right.
But one of the things we do poorly is we bring our biases to ideas. We project things and we sometimes don't listen and understand why someone is different with it. And there was a lot of that in Afghanistan. Again, Iraq ultimately, in my opinion, ultimately shook itself out because cash rules everything, right? They don't care about that in the same way. They really don't. It's kind of eerie to the Western ideology of, wait, you care more about this tiny group of people that are your tribe. You care more about this specific piece of rocky land that you can't grow anything on, but you've been here with your family for thousands of years, or or when it got taken back, like you rose back up. Like when you start looking at some of those ideologies and some of that complication to it, that's really where it came from. I think it was just ignorance and biased that, we're gonna really on some levels it's kind of the white savior complex. Like I know that's like a dirty term on the right hand side of the aisle, but like there is definitely some I'll make this a little more palatable, Western savior complex, right? Like if I throw enough money at this and I throw, and I think that's a lot of what happens. Like once we got UBL, right? Once we blasted him, and then it's like, okay, well, we're here and we've been tearing this country apart, not tearing this country apart, but like running all around trying to find this guy. We finally found him. We know this region isn't stable. We know that if we leave, it's just going to descend back into the chaos that it was. What do we do? And that started happening. We tried to take some of the Iraq playbook. It didn't work because the corruption was all about how do you get it into your family? Like, how do we get our tiny little pocket of the tribe enriched, ingratiated?
Right.
Karzai is a scumbag. Okay.
Who?
Like,
I'm sorry?
Karzai, the former president. Like that is that. I mean, but all right. Well, back off. He's a huge opportunist. Okay, like I mean, let me say that. One of those things where and he was like, he didn't care. He just didn't. He like wanted it all. He didn't give a fuck. So he put it out on Twitter. So I don't mind repeating it. But General Tony Thomas, who another former Delta commander, another superhero of mine, was the United States Special Operations Commander by the end, 4-star general, had a quote when he walked out of a meeting with Karzai. He's like, "There's no way that we care more about this country than he does." Like, because it wasn't the country, it was his tribe, it was his interest, and they were very centralized. And so, also the Grozny, when he left, the president, when everything fell, the number varies, but he left with hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, literally in duffel bags in cash. Like, time to go. When he bugged to Switzerland because it was all completely coming apart. Like he bankrupted the cash personally. Like again, the five family mafia stuff here. When you think of a gang as a tribe and and sort of the tribal identities, it's not a perfect comp, but just for the American Western ideal, it works. It works enough to at least get you sort of where it is. So,
but what was going through? Because you're, I can see what you mean. You mean there's a lot of on the Biden administration front. There's ineptitude afterwards or whatever, but leading up to that decision,
arrogance.
Okay.
And my answer is arrogance. He decided he was leaving, and I have since talked to a lot of people. Okay. Some in government, friends on the Hill. Like that's the fun part about having a poli-sci degree. Like some people are better people than I, and they try and go do genuine good public works and public service. I am not that guy. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a capitalist.
Right.
Universally, and friends on the left, friends on the right. One of my buddies who was trying to do me a super solid because we were trying to get people out, and I'm like, I need to know what I'm like. I flat out, I called in a huge marker. I'm like, I need to know how much time we really have. And he's like, dude, and this is on Signal. I'm like, bro, like there are families that, there was a gentleman who had been an Afghan general, a commander, and he had his 2 wives and like 12 kids. Like you can't just, and they were not in Kabul. Like you can't just like wake up one day and suddenly get them there. Like, it's a literal full-on military mission, and we don't really have a lot of resources to begin with. And we're like, oh, I'm like, brother, like I know I'm asking a big. I do not have the credits in the favor bank to ask what I'm asking, but like I'm desperate, and like, how much time do we really have? And even from the jump, he's like, you guys have 3 days less than what he's saying. He's like, it's all like, it's just not going to happen. And that was before the bomb went off. Right. They're like, it's going to wind down. And I heard from people that, they estimate about 125,000 people got out, that through all that. One of my friends that worked for as a congressional aide said that the expectation was like after 100,000, they were going to start making it more difficult.
Who? The Taliban?
Just the government. Like because it was a capability issue. Is that it fell so quickly and they were so unprepared that the magic number they thought they could support was 100,000, and after that they were just going to be like, well, whatever. Like that's all we can support. That's all we can do. Right. Panic. I mean, arrogance on the front end. Panic. What the fuck do we do on the back end? Right. Like, I mean, the classic oh shit tale of just the world. I'm critical of I generally believe that number from what I saw in my experience, and I'm super critical of it. I also do have enough human understanding of logistics to understand why some government bureaucrat, shitting his pants or her pants, whatever the case may be, their pants, would be like, well, if this is all we can do, and we'll just figure it out on the back end, right? But the other thing is that not only was the arrogance, but they just lied their fucking faces off. Like, even when they left and Blinken gets up there, it's like, oh, well, we didn't get everyone out, which, by the way, is of all of the things that enrage me, just fucking enrage me, Peter. The number one thing about in the military is you don't leave your people behind.
Yes.
The sole function of government is to protect its citizens. That's it. That's why why are we not a tribal identity like that? Why do we have this higher evolved, different, whatever? It's because we believe in this concept of our country and our collective of people is greater, than the sum of its parts. And we will not leave those parts because we are lesser if we do. That is basically the Western ideological contract of government. And we left people behind, which already is a catastrophic failure of government, period. Blinken gets up there. It's like, oh, well, we think there's 100 to 200 Americans who want to get back. They just released something last week that 500 passport holders, not the green card holders. That works out to like 1,200 total. 500 American citizens on a fucking passport have come back since he made that statement. And by the way, we all knew that. Like, anyone who had any tangential thing knew that his number was bullshit, right? And we're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, say what you want about one administration or the other, how you feel about it. Again, I'm pretty centrist. I had plenty of critiques for the former president. But the one thing I have no doubt about Donald Trump is that if this had started going this way, he would have gotten someone on the phone and go, here's the deal. We're leaving. And we'll solve that later. But all of our people come with, you play nice, because if you don't, all my special operations guys on that airbase that could barely ever fucking leave it are going to leave with everything, including a fucking knife in their teeth, like they're goddamn pirates, and they leave nothing but smoking holes in the ground. We are going to start killing you. And you want to know what? The Taliban absolutely would have played ball. They would have
absolutely.
And especially when you see how desperate they are for aid, and how much they're begging, and how they knew what the long game was. They knew if they want international relationships, even you saw it in the end, their first PR conference with their PR guy, I was like, again, I work in marketing, marketing and strategic communication PR. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck taught these guys, but Jesus Christ, are they tight? The Gen 1 Taliban that we dealt with, they were just kind of brutish. We are here for the glory of Allah. Their talking points were super.
I remember Rob O'Neill's book. He talked about how guys in the beginning, they wouldn't even aim their guns because they just assumed that Allah would make their bullets hit their targets.
For sure. That is not the Taliban in 2021.
Right.
They are super polished. They are super refined. They know how to play the game in a way that Western culture hears. And, that's a natural evolution, call it warfare, call it statesmanship, whatever you want to call it. So wait a minute. So we're dealing with 2.0, who knows what to say. They're at the 2-yard line, and they're going to screw that up because we say we're leaving, but we want our people. No. Again, $12 billion is still frozen in bank accounts. You think they're going to start a gun battle with us when all we want to do is get our people out? Even then, it was ISIS-K that blew the bomb. Which, by the way, for those people wondering, so the Taliban is super, super conservative, right? Trying to think of a good analogy here. All right, just the way that I put this is like, if you want to get a level of just like how insane, like, so Darth Vader's a pretty bad dude in Star Wars, right? Like, I mean, he's evil and he's got a whole bunch, he's bad, right?
Right.
But Palpatine, the Emperor, is way worse, right? Like, he is just like super out there.
Right.
If the Taliban is Darth Vader, ISIS-K in their hatred of the West is the Emperor. Okay, like, it's like they're in a fight because ISIS-K thinks the Taliban isn't conservative enough, isn't hate the West enough, that they are besmirching and befouling the word of Allah by doing some of the super like generally not considered Islam things that they do. Like, again, Darth Vader's bad, the Emperor's worse. That's actually a really, I'm gonna have to remember that. That's like a pretty good parallel if I'm gonna explain this.
Well
like,
done.
I mean, who do you want, Darth Vader or the Emperor? Can I have neither? Right? Like, I mean, how are we just killing both? Like, so that's essentially what, and that's who lit the bomb off. The Emperor lit the bomb off, not Darth Vader, because like, and so you have this. You just had this really complicated thing. Like, there were ways to do this, and then the other thing is that we are entirely dependent on them. Like, Haqqani in the very beginning. So right after America leaves, we wreck Hamid Karzai International Airfield. So, it takes them a little while to repair it, whatever. The only real functioning airfield was like an 8-hour drive to Herat to get people out. Haqqani, the new interior minister, who has a $10 million, like, there was a joke between some of my friends at the State Department because there was a rumor he was going to be in Doha, the negotiations. Like, so question, it's like, we're chatting, like, former special operations guys move around. I'm like, so question, they're like, what's up? I'm like, so if someone's like in the room as the diplomatic bodyguard and Haqqani walks in, they pull out their cig and smoke him, are they going to jail? Are they collecting the bounty? Right? Like, is the bounty like it's kind of like, like Schrodinger's kill, right? Like, what do you do? Like, we were like, but he had his emissaries go down there and basically held the planes hostage, one for ransom. People paid, like, all the NGOs and stuff and the American government, like, paid bounties to get people out from there. And then also was checking their manifest to decide if you wanted to keep them in Afghanistan or not. And those planes were so slow to get off the ground because all that negotiation, all that back end stuff. Not that that ever made the news, but it happened. And it's, it's one of those dangerous things. It was like, that's where, if you're going to leave. Okay, I don't like it. And I think that it has certainly borne itself out that it was a catastrophic, cataclysmic mistake. And people are dying of starvation and they are dying of cold. And that is America as the leader of the Western thrust into that country. That's something we as a nation have to wear. That's an uncomfortable truth. And I know people are going to give me all the America First bullshit and whatever. Like, no. We broke it. Let's admit we broke it. Now, we know why we broke it, but we were there for another decade after we accomplished our objective, trying to make that place better for the citizens. And not only have we not done that, we have made it so much categorically worse that I'm just not here for it. That's the consequences of the actions that were taken. Agree with it, disagree with it, whatever, man. Like, but those are the facts of the situation. And now, it's like we broke it. And at the same time, we're still in the spot where terrorists are in control. It's a complete unmitigated disaster. It's a complete, absolute failure of the administration that, in my opinion, again, started from arrogance, has been led by incompetence. And now it's almost like every single time they say the bare minimum about Afghanistan, just hoping it's going to go away.
Right.
And it's like, the thing is that the reporting on this is being done by agency free press. It's being done by Reuters. It's being done by the Associated Press. And, like, say what you want about the Washington Post, the New York Times, and some of these papers, like, they don't waste their time on bullshit stories. They don't, they're not infiltrating reporters into this part of the world unless there's something going on. Like, you can mistrust the reporting, but trust the fact. But they're not going to send them, like, follow the money. Like, why would you send someone unless there was a reason to, right?
Here's my theory on why there's a disconnect. Part of the reason, and I certainly know, as much as I like Trump in many ways, I don't think he was a guy who said, oops. I don't think he says oops very often.
No, not at all.
But Biden doesn't say it either.
Correct.
with a smiley face, like Biden, like that old meme that the bombs have a Black Lives Matter sticker on it or whatever. But it's the everything's fine, mission accomplished vibe that bothers the fuck out of me. If you could say, you know what, I thought there were 100 or 200, even if that's a lie. I thought there were 100, 200. There's actually 500. He's still, I think last week when that report came out, his own government is saying, nope, there's more. And he's still just this complete success. I stand behind my, it's just like, fuck.
Save Our Allies had an emergency mission where they raised $300,000 in the past 72 hours to get 55 passport holders and green card holders out because they found them this week.
Wow.
Okay. And that's the other thing about this that I don't know. I mean, like it would have to be like a documentary, and I don't even know. Like, you could give me any filmmaker in the world, and I don't know who it would be. Probably wouldn't even be someone famous. But the documentary about what private citizens did, what veterans, former service, former or even current NGOs, and current for those other two categories too, did to get people out when the government failed, is a story that needs to be told. And it needs to be told in as objective a light as possible, just to say that when literally all of the Western powers failed, okay? And I didn't just work with Americans, I worked with Brits, I worked with probably the coolest story, which I will not share other than to say that there were two kids that did not have any family that were endangered, right? They were children that we got out. We got them because they had family in the UK, and we were able to link them up. It took bribing a low-level member of parliament, or not bribing, blackmailing a low-level member of parliament. It required forged documents. Like, I'm not bullshitting. Like, this is why I'm also being a little vague about this. It required forging documents. It required eventually trading up the chain, and it boiled down to these are two children who have no family in this country because they've either been rolled up or killed, right? And what family they do have is right here. And all we want to do is use a program to let children be reunited with their parents or with a family member. And it took that. I mean, like I can't look at some of these things and understand how impossible it. And P.S. We've got all the smoke for the United States government, but it's like there's an emergency sort of back channel email address that I was told about to the UK government by a friend. So I hit it up. It took them 33 days to get back to me to tell me we're sorry we missed your emails. This isn't a uniquely American thing, okay? Like this is a failure of government thing. But it's like, and that's the thing that's just so. I don't know what it is about the human condition where you have all the cognitive dissonance that we have sometimes, right? Like, I still keep a picture of the two kids that we got out. Like there was a proof of life picture to show the parents that we did have them, and this was the plan and everything. And I keep it on my phone. I don't share it with a lot of people. I just don't think that's appropriate. But it's one of those things that I remind myself of. I'm not always the best human. I can be a real shithead. ask my ex-wife. At the end of the day, it was just, there was, here I am. So, I mean, no one else was going to get, these kids out, this tiny little group that we all found a way to band together, and everyone went there. But the thing was that we had there was a personal relationship with their family, and it kept extending out. One of the biggest things that bothers me about this entire fucking narrative about Post and everything is like, oh, well, what about the, and this is another problem I have such with the administration. Well, what about the terrorists? What if they snuck in? Like there was, what pisses me off is that 98 to 99% of these people like me, got them through the gate because it was a shit show, and got them the right people, and we vouched for them. Okay, they are our friends. They were our colleagues. They were people we knew personally. Okay, so the troops that were fighting over there, the NGOs, the State Department, like we put our stamp on 98% of these people. And for that other 2% that might have snuck through, or maybe someone didn't know, or the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing or whatever, if you didn't have biometrics on them, if you didn't have all the things that you could have done, like what infuriates about this administration is like, keep them in Doha, keep them in Germany, keep them in Romania, keep them outside, keep them on the lily pads until you're sure.
Right.
It didn't happen. It was like, how fast can we process them through Doha and ship them out? Keep them there. If you don't know, be sure, because the thing that I was having this conversation with someone the other day, it takes one worthless motherfucker who snuck through to turn this into well, we never should have done it, with ignorant, stupid fucking people. When it's like, at the end of this, like, do you think that literally, again, it goes back to the documentary, and I don't know how to tell the story, but it's like, if I showed you the actual names that these things got to, okay, like Anthony Blinken knows me by first name and hates me. Like, for real, like I heard that from a friend at the State Department because I did some other bullshit, but that's another story. Like this, if I showed you like what it took to get those two kids out through the British government, like the names and like the connections and like what it took, you'd be like, holy, I'm talking with no bullshit, no exaggeration, literally the highest levels of the British government. Okay. That's not an exaggeration. If some of the stories that my friends have to like get people through, same thing on the American side, like these, you might not have known right away, but by the end of it, like the friend of your friend got you to some really high places. And it was predominantly special operations people. It was predominantly senior State Department who had recently retired. We're, talking senior members, like I said, like the Red Cross, all like people who have reputations, okay? People who put their reputation, their credibility on the line in the middle of this humanitarian crisis and disaster that are all like, one of the things I always say about special operations is that it's a really small community. So even if I don't know someone like who's in the Rangers at my time, or like might have been a different peer group, I can find someone and ask about them. And you don't ask anything else. Like, hey, what do you think? If the first words are, oh, they're a good dude. It's the good dude network. That's what happened the entire time when it came to the Afghan evac, was like, it's a good dude network. There was no, checklist and all this. It was like, yo, this is my boy, Tom, and he's got an issue. Trust him. And then you're like, all right, it's like, oh, hey, Peter, nice to meet you. Like, what's going on? Well, here's my situation. Well, I can't handle that one because I don't really have a connection at that gate, but my buddy Bill does. Hang on. And the next thing you know, you're coming into a Sigma group. Now it's the four of us. Hey, Bill, this is Tom. I got him from Peter. He's a good dude. Right. And that's what had happened so often. It's like, well, that's how we got there. Right. And that's how these people are getting through. And it was like that credibility. And it's like, that's the thing that honestly worries me as this goes forward, is that if something bad happens and something like, it's like, no, like we literally put our credibility amongst our peers on the line for 3 weeks solid, just not sleeping, barely eating. I lost 10 pounds during that time. Like, no exaggeration. I didn't sleep, like, just trying to help these people. And that's why I tell them, I was like, man, the 98% or more really are also good dudes. And it's good dudes, and good dudettes and their families. And all they want is to live up to the American dream. And I know this because I was in the National Guard at Camp Atterbury, Indiana, before I moved to first North Carolina and now I'm in Omaha. I got a call from my buddy who is still on Camp Atterbury and is still very, not only plugged into Atterbury, but the local area for central Indiana and the local political apparatus, because he used to work in politics. One of the things is there's so many jobs that these Afghans are like so willing to do. Like, these people are willing to go work in an Amazon warehouse for $17.50 an hour and just work all the horror stories you hear about. Like, they're like, let's go. Right. But it's getting them off the base. It's getting them into the housing. It's getting all the paperwork required to like allow this transition. And they're getting frustrated. They're like, we want to go contribute. Right.
But in the interim, what are the lives of these? I hope you're okay on time for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. What are the lives? I mean, what are their lives looking like, being surrounded or infiltrated or threatened or whatever it looks like from the Taliban?
In Afghanistan right now?
Yes.
Oh, dude, people are still getting smoked. I mean, flat out, like, it's. I'm not nearly as plugged in to that now that once your network is your network, and
right.
But I've heard from a couple of people that people are still getting killed, that are people still getting found out, that but also too, it's the desperation, right? When when everyone's getting poorer and poorer and poorer, and there's less and less and less, it's not just, did you help the Americans? It's not just, I mean, this is an extreme example, but I'm a big student of history and a big student of like when things go wrong. When you look at the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, it was a bunch of gangsters who got into power, who had a really dumb idea that any basic person could have told you wasn't going to work. And not from communism, by the way, just from like how they thought they were going to run the country if you really like subsect it. And then they got paranoid because they thought that the other people in power were jockeying for power. And the next thing you know, 25% of the population is dead in the killing fields. Okay. Were there probably some anti-communist people and some fascists and some like democratic people that I'm sure there were, like, and I've been to Cambodia. Like I actually toured, you know, the prisons, and it was so horrific. I couldn't actually, I'd planned to go see the killing because I can't do it. Like it was just like, you go through this, what used to be a school was now this place of torture. And it was, I mean, I'm glad I went for the experience and to learn the history, but like, it's just, and it really boils down to Pol Pot was just paranoid. That's, I mean, really, why did all that happen? Paranoia. And not wanting to listen, like when an educated person or a elite, as they call them, say, hey, this isn't, you're never going to get the production agriculture that you need from the rice with what you're doing. Like it just doesn't scale.
Right. Mao had that same thing. The good intentions, you go into it with good intentions or what you believe are good intentions. And then in order to make this final solution, whatever the fuck, in order to make that work, you're going to have to take them out. And then that grows and grows and grows. Yeah. And
I mean, that's a super extreme example, but this is the thing that worries me as a student of history. Okay. So you have this autocratic group, right? That we've got 30 years of tape on them. Okay, we know what the Taliban does. We know what they're capable of. We know what their baseline they're willing to do, right? You have no money. You have no crops. Winter is not even coming. It's here, right? And it's like you start looking around. It's like, when is the bad? Because whether they help the Americans or not, is it even going to matter soon? I mean, objectively, this is just history potentially repeating itself. This is why it bothers me so much, and this is why, sometimes I still don't understand the disconnect in humanity. Like we're so excited to be there, and like, yay, America, wave the flag, we're gonna go kill terrorists. But then, like on the back end, like we're just gonna let tens of thousands of people starve to death. That's what we're headed for. And if tens of thousands of people start starving to death, what are you gonna do to try and not starve? If you're the government that's trying to control the person who's trying to do something just not to starve, and by the way, again, the number from the UN is 97% of people below the poverty line by March of next year. That's the number. What in the ever-loving fuck, man? Like,
and who's going to be willing to dangle what carrots, quite literally carrots in front of them to be like, okay, all those guns and stuff, check out all this food we'll give you if you...
And it's just one of those things where it's like, and this goes back to the arrogance of the administration. And this is where it goes back to never seeing a plan and not understanding what they're trying to do. It's like, you want to know what, because at the end of the day, you want to talk about the courage of conviction. If the Biden administration just said, we're going to play a game, it's called hide and go fuck yourself, Afghanistan, and hide and go fuck yourself. I don't like it. I think that's abhorrent, but at least he stepped up and said, fuck you guys, right? At least the administration made that decision or said something. But this is one of those things where it's like, we live in such an amazing, great country that people can be willfully ignorant and get away with it here.
Correct.
And they can do it in the UK. And also like in the Western world, in the developed world where we have plenty, you can choose to be willfully ignorant and get away with it. Right. You can't do that in other places because you at least have to have a certain level. Like you said, they don't have to be the magna cum laude, the summa cum laude like my sisters, but you have to have a set of skills and be able to apply it, right? It's like history tells you where this ends if someone doesn't step up and someone doesn't step in, and we broke it. And am I saying that we go back at this point? I don't know. I mean, I never would have left, not because I wanted us to be there, but because no one. Look. We were talking about this off air, but here's the analogy that I would use. My favorite politician of my lifetime, and the person that like if I could like wave the magic wand and like try and be like politically ideal, was always John McCain. Like he served, even when I disagreed with him or even when he disagreed with people, you'd hear people out. I thought that one of the more courageous things he did when he was running for president is that woman came up and like perpetuated the false Islamophobic thing about Obama.
Right.
Listen, like, hey, that's not true. We know it's not true. I have plenty of disagreement with this man, and I'm here to tell you all about how you should vote for me and not for him. But what we are not going to do is deal in falsehoods and deal in lies. That is not on the table here.
Right.
You know, and his last act literally before he died, was to walk into Congress and cast the deciding vote to keep Obamacare. I got a million problems with Obamacare. He even said after he cast the vote, I got a million problems with Obamacare, and I don't like it. But guess what? I have not heard from my colleagues in the GOP a better solution. I haven't even heard a counter solution to this. So, well, I have a million problems, and we can always, what I'm not going to do is outright rip something out that is helping people, that is doing good, even if I don't think it's doing the maximum amount of good or the type of good I would have wanted to do, all things being equal, if I had won that election. But the harm that this is going to do is needless harm, because this is the status quo. Now, why would we rip the status quo away and create chaos? There's a real apt comparison and apt analogy going on, that's been going on now for 9 months in Afghanistan. I'm not saying there's a perfect solution. There's not. There's always been bad solutions. It's always been the best, worst solution. But where we are right now is the worst case scenario when we pulled out. And we are now doing, for getting people out and everything like that. Now we're at this worst case scenario of human crisis, and like the thing is that you go to the other levels of why did we go to Somalia in 1993? Because there was an extreme famine, and there was one warlord in Mohammed Farah Aidid who controlled Mogadishu. And we decided that in order to not have famine of a literal biblical scale, we needed to get that guy out. So 97. What I'm saying was there was a lot of things that we had nothing to do with that contributed to how Somalia ended up. Like that really, if you really want to go back in the history and everything, that's all on the freaking Europeans. Okay, like they fucked that up, but we went in to try and fix it. But now, so this is our version of. I mean, it's really actually super apt comparison. Now, this is our version of Somalia in the 90s, and we're just sitting here going. Only it's playing out at a geometrically faster scale because it's even more fucked up.
Right.
I mean, come on, man. Like at some point, what do you like? I think there's no good answer here, but it's like I know what the worst answer is, and that's what we're living through right now.
Right. And I think it points to a bigger. I think it points to a bigger problem and solution. I don't know what this necessarily solution is, but it's come up multiple times, and I think we've talked about it maybe offline. I can't remember, but when you have, and I've talked about this, regardless when it comes to certain things, and I don't know necessarily where you're at with it, but when it comes to the mandates, my experience is, regardless of what we feel and what we don't or whatever, most of the people I know, even who are 110 fucking % pro-vaccine, God bless their hearts, I love them, are not for the mandates. Almost all of the motherfuckers I know. So, but here's the thing, and maybe that's just me, my what's the word, small experience. But I live in Manhattan. I live in the Upper West motherfucking side. I live in the bastion of hello liberal, thank you daddy government, may I have another, okay? And if my experience is that most motherfuckers are anti-mandate, where in the fuck are these people? And this is the main problem. There's a disconnect between our politicians and the majority of people. Right. They don't need to listen to us because they, as long as they make the people who gave them the money to run happy and just blind everybody, like everything's great, la 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 la. Yep. All my decisions in Afghanistan were good. All of them. Yep. We're doing that. As long as they make them happy. So there's a disconnect between our. And the same thing is happening with, you're talking about using cowboy methods and to get people out. You know what I mean? Like,
stone cold.
Right.
They're already going to make the Pineapple Express movie, which I get it. It's super cinematic. No, they are. Like Channing Tatum's already on to produce and star. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, which by the way is super cinematic. Like, no, for real. Like, it's already in development.
Wow.
And like very far along development. I talked to a friend that's out in LA the other day. Like, it's not only the disconnect, it's that somewhere along the way, in order to get elected, and actually I would use Biden and Trump for this. In order to get elected, you needed to be a certain sort of person that could really inflame the far of your base. Like this is one of the things that I say, like, look to the farthest left and look to the farthest right and see what's there. Okay. When Illa Omar and Marjorie Taylor Greene can both get elected and can both have the platforms that those two women have, like, what? Like, I'm sorry, but like, I actually wish there were two dudes. Like I wish that there were like two men that I could do this. So like people didn't accuse me of sexist, but it's like when those two have these massive platforms that one side does the other, and they are both fucking moronic.
Yes.
Okay. Like, listen, just because on the other side, it's like, as a Democrat, I've met Jason Crow before, who's from Colorado. He's a Democrat, former Army Ranger. Don't always agree with him, you know what I'm saying? But he's a good dude. Like he's well-meaning. You know, Seth Moulton, who's actually in our book, was a former MARSOC commander, is also a Democrat in Massachusetts. But he was also one of the ones with he was also one of the two dudes that's like, oh, things are going wrong in Afghanistan. I'm going over to look at it. He got eviscerated by his party because they thought he was showing Biden up. He's like, this is a dumpster fire. That conversation was way deep off the record, and I'm not going to do that to him just because I name dropped him. And honestly, it's him and one or two other guys, like Pete Meyer but he also went over with Pete Meyer, who's a Republican. They're like, yo, bipartisanly, something's going on. Something is wrong. Let us go assess this as members of Congress because that's our job. And what did they both? Myers is like raised up as this hero because he's the Republican, fighting the oppression of the Biden administration. And Moulton's almost getting censured. At least, I mean, that's what I don't know what I didn't ask about that part, for simply doing his job. Right. Like, what in the ever loving? This is the thing that you talk about. The disconnect. It's like having the courage of even being able to say, just, I generally ascribe to my party's ideals, but in this case, I'm going somewhere else. Like we were talking about this off air, but like Joe Manchin just did what McCain did 8 years ago. No, 5 years ago. And he's getting murdered for it, just absolutely getting crucified for it. And you want to know what? Like, I take a step back and it's like, oh, the green energy something. He is the senator for the largest coal-producing place in the world in West Virginia. Okay?
But see, Tom, he's not responsible to the people he represents. He's responsible to Ilhan fucking Omar.
This is the thing about, like, again, we talked about this at the very beginning about how we have the most imperfect, designed to have friction government the world has ever seen. Madison was a genius. He went completely the other way. Guess what? This is actually the American ideal of constitutional republicanism and democracy in action right now. Manchin is are there special interests? I'm sure there are. Did someone give him some? The coal industry is dying. Did someone find a way? I have no doubt that there's some level of grit, but at the same time, it only works and it only gets by is because the people that he serves, the people he gets elected by, the people he answers to are pro-coal. Right. Regardless of everything else in the Democratic ticket, regardless of everything else, and I thought it was really when Jen Sky comes out and hammers him, and then everyone's like, oh, well, he was against the child tax credit. He was like, it was bullshit. I've never been against the child tax credit. I have tried to do everything I can, but at the end of the day, I can't get there. Because why on earth would the dude who doesn't just represent the interests and the economics, but the people that mine it,
right,
suddenly be super green? Because it's the same thing with the way that McCain was like, listen, I hate Obamacare, but you don't have a better plan. It's one of those things where it's like, you want to know what? Tell that man how you're going to make sure all that green energy goes to West Virginia. If you really want it that bad, instead of taking this dying, archaic, literally, District 12 from Hunger Games area, which, they shot that in North Carolina, it was 20 miles to West Virginia. I'm not even kidding. That's where they shot that movie. Because I was living in Germantown. It's so how do you tell that guy and say that Huntington, West Virginia, and these other places, we're going to make them green energy tech hubs. We're going to invest in your state. That's what it would have taken to get that deal done. But guess what? They didn't do it. You want to know why? Because exactly what you said. Because you're supposed to be beholden to this notion of a party. And honestly, the thing that I think is hilarious about it, and this is why I actually, as cynical as I am to politicians, as much I generally hate them, I actually believe this dude worked really, really hard to try and get the deal done, is because it's been almost 9 months. Like he's been out, say what you want about Kristen Sinema, but she never had a platform. She was always like, whatever she was trying to do, like it never really was cohesive and it never really made sense. Like either in the press, the interviews she gave, I was always like, okay, other than dressing horribly, what are you doing? Right? I mean, like really, come on, like the jean jacket as a member of Congress, it's a bit much. But like, Manchin was always like, these are my, like, I have to represent my people. I'm concerned about, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was one of those things where even Biden up until 48 hours ago was like, listen, we had productive conversations, not as staff. And like, even Manchin, like in the middle of it, like, it's like, yeah, I knew they're going to hit back hard, but I don't blame the president. It's his staff. Like, even classy, he's just getting raked over the coals and getting hammered. Like, that's missing in the discourse. Like, do I agree with a lot of Joe Manchin stuff? No. Am I ever going to? No. Did I, but at least the thing I'll say about him is at least the man stood in the fire and he said, and it's like when you take one step back and go, who does this man represent electedly? Right. What is his role? What is his job? Like, he represents the people of West Virginia. And if he made the case that some of the green things were going to negatively impact the people that he answers to, why are you pissed off? Make him a better deal.
And I'll add to this, and I'll bring it back to the Afghanistan situation. Listen, I don't agree with this assessment, and that's why I started this fucking show, is because a lot of people believe that the Republican or the Conservative Party is much more like they're not humanitarian, and the liberals are humanitarian. I don't agree with that assessment because whatever. But if the liberals are the ones, if the Democrats are the bleeding hearts, right? That's we always call it, bleeding heart. Why are they fucking silent on Afghanistan? Fucking silent.
Well, one, when your leader acts like a jackass, and he absolutely acted like a jackass. Like, look, I've said it. Like, go through my social media before the whole, some of the Afghan stuff. I had plenty of smoke for the previous administration. Okay, like there are plenty of things I was hypercritical of Trump for, and I stand by everything I said. Like, do your worst, aggregators. But at the same time, I also have all the smoke for the Biden administration. And what this goes back to the polemics we were talking about. Like, that middle ground, like you used to be able to like disagree in America, and not be a pariah and not be Satan. And honestly, like to this day, my aunt and my cousin, her son, who are very liberal, still think that it is my fault, and like people that think like me that caused Donald Trump to be elected and were Satan because I had the audacity to live in the state of North Carolina and cast a vote for Gary Johnson. And say, so I think that Trump's like, at the time I'm like, I think Trump's like, a D. And I think Hillary's like a D minus. And I'm not voting for a D because that doesn't represent my interest. I think they both suck. I think they're both bad options. I think that neither one of them really has like the interest that I want in the United States. And I am choosing not to cast my vote for them. I am choosing to vote for someone that I think is like a C minus. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm like and suddenly like, well, if only you had, okay, me, it's like if only you and 29,000 other people hadn't voted for him and had voted for Hillary, she didn't represent my interests. I didn't agree with her, right? And I mean,
even though she had a vagina, and a vagina equals morally superior.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, but then that argument all completely falls apart. It was like, well, what about Nikki Haley in South Carolina? Which if Trump doesn't run, she's certainly got to be on the front burner for it. Oh, well, we can't. What about Tulsi? Like, it's one of those things where it's like we get very selective, especially when our dander gets up as humans and Americans, especially about the selectivity of the argument that we want. It had nothing to like, it had nothing to do with me that Hillary Clinton was a woman. Now, let's also be honest. Let's have an authentic moment. Sexism played a role in that election. Like, let's not pretend that it didn't. It did. But
I think we just don't like her.
but that's the other point to it, is that what was a legacy of people disliking her. Okay, like, and this is the other thing. I had this conversation with someone talking about like QAnon conspiracy theories and how, Hillary and Bill are the center of the secret deep dark cabal, but their thing is the child predator, faction of it, and like all the other like weirdo, ludicrous fucking Q shit, right? Yeah. Which just, oh my God. But it's like, you only can get to that position with them is that when you pull back and start slicing with Occam's razor, are the Clintons, and I mean their education says it, their policy, are they brilliant legal scholars? Yes, they are. Have they chosen for 40 years at this point, with no exaggeration, to figure out how gray an area they can play in without crossing the line into the black because they are brilliant legal scholars? Yes, they have. Okay. And they have, I mean, literally built one of the things I loved that the impeachment, like American Crime Story did, and because we studied this ad nauseum for one of my political science classes. Ironically enough, actually, the professor that taught me the theory of like that we were talking about earlier, like the percentages and everything like that. Yeah. It was one of his like 201 courses he had to teach so he could do what he wanted. We went through ad nauseum in the like should Bill Clinton have been impeached or not? Like that was just, it was a summer course. That's what we did. Right. But they said it in the show, and it was totally true. Clinton's entire defense hinged on the previous prosecutor asking him under oath in the deposition based on their definition of sexual contact. And it didn't include oral sex. And he recognized it, and he always answered to that question. Okay, that's brilliant legal maneuvering. Okay, it's bullshit. It's how like why we hate lawyers so much in America, right? But he saw a way to get himself out of them because he was that smart. Like, you know, credit. Like there's a saying in the military: if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. If you got caught, you weren't trying hard enough. So credit's where it's due, right? You know,
you played the game. Yeah.
You played the game. But when you take the next step, right, like also it doesn't mean that it wasn't great as fuck. It doesn't mean that it wasn't disingenuous as hell. Like, okay, everyone knows a blowjob is sexual contact. I mean, come on, man. Right. Like that is the, you know, that's the, like, but that's the gamesmanship and the maneuverability. And then taking it all the way back, why didn't I like Hillary? And why wouldn't I vote for her personally? It's because I don't want that gray area shit as a president. Right. And I got all the tape in the world on you for that. Like, yes, you are a brilliant political policy mind. She is. Whether I agree or disagree with her policies, she knows how to write a brief. She knew how to construct law. She knew how to construct narrative. Great. Credit where it is due, because I think that's a genuine credit you should give them, whether you agree with how they structured or not. But do I think you're going to use that power for good, or do I think you're going to use that power for party or personal self-interest? I got 40 years of tape saying that you're going to do the former.
Right.
And like, I'm sorry, like that's nuanced. Like it's not because she's a woman, it's because she's a Clinton, because she's part of that legacy. For me, hell yeah. Right. You know, and at the same time, like I looked at Trump and I'm like, you are the classic robber baron. Like I'll just tell, like, I'm sorry to your audience, like Donald J. Trump is the modern robber baron. Always has been. Like, say what you want about him. He's like, you know, his dad was a slumlord. Like, we're not telling anything out of school. Like, you're in New York. Right. You know, he inherited the legacy. He figured out how to 2.0 it. Like, it doesn't mean he's not a brilliant man. He is in his way, right? Like, and the things that he did, like the Clintons, when it came to were brilliant in their way, and they were total dumbasses in others. Trump has the same affliction. But the thing that I look at people and I ask them, like, why were those my two choices? And why, to double up on that, did I get the robber baron versus the old man, right? For that matter, like in 2024, Biden isn't going to run again. It doesn't look like Harris is going to run. I think that, you know, so who's going to run on the left and who's going to run on the right? Like, if you're going to handicap the field right now, who is it? And who are you really excited about? I mean, say what you will about, you know, the Bushes, which I don't like legacy politics. It's another thing. But you trusted them to be competent. Say what you want about Obama, but no one ever doubted his competency. Like, you could disagree with his policies or everything like that, but it's like when the biggest scandal you have in office is you wore a tan suit, you know, and then, you know, Operation Fast and Furious down on the border, like, which was totally fucked, by the way. But like, these are normal, everyday presidential things that agree or disagree with the person in office and their ideals. Like, they steered the ship properly. It's not an accident. The Obamas and the Bush, you know, and George W. Bush's families are friends now because they've been through it. There's always that, I can disagree with your ideas, kind of like what you said, like it's okay to disagree with politics on your shirt. Right. They can disagree, but still say you're a good person. What worries me right now in America is that Trump's evil. No, Trump's a robber baron. He's opportunistic. You know, well, Hillary's the greatest thing on earth. No, she's a legal scholar who's opportunistic. Right. And it's just the fact that they're coming to the front and they're playing to their polls on the left or the right. That's what concerns me.
Right.
That's what I think you're seeing in Afghanistan, because why is it buried? Because the far left doesn't give a shit. Not that they don't care about the humanitarian or whatever else they might say. They don't give a shit because it hurts their guy. Why is the right hammering away at Biden? Like, does the far right actually care about the Afghans that are starving? Probably not. But is it a way to hurt and hit the other guy? Yeah. And then you have people like me who have had some level of familiarity with the country who don't see these people just as a number or as, brown faces. Like, let's also, or that let's throw that wrinkle in there.
Right.
And it's like, listen, these are just by and large good people. Like, every time I do an interview, I make it a point to say, listen, people like me vouch for these people. I'm not saying that someone didn't sneak through. That's possible. But the overwhelming majority are people that I vouch for and friends like me vouch for. That's who came. But the fact that I even have to say that to the left and the right, by the way, like, this is not a one-sided. That's when you know it's gone sideways, at least in my opinion. And that I'll get off my soapbox now because I just
no. And I appreciate. We'll start wrapping up, but I really appreciate the cowboyness of this story, because I think, and maybe I'll, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Mark Hughes, who's a comic who's been on the show a bunch, but I was having a conversation with him, and I was like, the more authoritarian bullshit, like the more this administration pulls the trigger on it, the better for all of us, because I believe, and I know it sounds QAnon-ish or whatever, maybe not really, but is that the more of us wake up, the more of us disgruntled, the more of us are like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. I mean, literally only 16.
That's not Q, that's democracy in action.
There you go. So only 16, right? Only 16% of the country has gotten the booster, by the way. But I think the more ineptitude, whatever you want to call it, the more poor decisions. I don't give a fuck whether it's malevolence or ineptitude. The more of us realize, oh, wait, the power's in my hands. Oh, I can just call a friend, or I can just call a this, I can just call a that. I can get in touch with the Red Cross. I can get in touch with Tom Amenta. I can do this. I can do that. When we reach outside and do more shit for ourselves, American spirit, baby. American motherfucking spirit. We go back to, oh, you know what? I'm not going to wait for somebody to give me the green light. I'm not going to wait for some fucking bitch who works at the DMV to cut the red tape for me. I'm going to do it my motherfucking self. I'm going to do it myself. And so the more, maybe it's, again, the disconnect in the government, but also the disconnect in bureaucracy. It's the bureaucratic machine is just built to build more bureaucracy. And so the more power we can take back for ourselves, the better.
No, I mean, so the Ranger Regiment, the plaque behind me, my old unit, our motto is sua sponte, and that's of their own accord. Like, at the end of the day, the other thing that I love about this story is that, in war, they say you move to the sound of the guns, right? Like, you run towards conflict. When everything went wrong in Afghanistan, everyone who in whatever way they could that decided to be involved ran towards the cries for help. Okay, like, it's not, and that's the thing. And for a moment, on some levels, it's maybe the proudest thing I've ever done in my life, because it was like left, right. Like, some of the people we worked with were super far left. Some were super far right. Some like me were centrist. Like, it didn't matter. Yep. But we all knew what the mission was. We all knew that if we did not help some of these people, they were going to die. Like, no, I'm not being a granite. They were going to die. And, and so how do we get it so they don't? How do we help? And, I certainly didn't do nearly as much as some other people, as some other people did. I like to save our allies, save thousands of people. You know what I'm saying? I can say that I positively impacted a couple dozen, but it doesn't matter. It was like, we are going to do what we can with what we have. And that's what matters. And so it was total cowboy shit on some levels, because it was just like, we knew there was a clock ticking, and we knew that whatever relationship we had, it mattered to us, and we were going to go fight for it. And to your point, that is the American spirit. That is the, you definitely see that in like the UK in its own way, and the Aussies and the Canadians. So I'd say it's like that Western ideology that is just so powerful. And it's like, why do nations like ours do so well? It's because of stuff like this. And it's like, you want to know what? Is it cowboy? Yeah. Is it pioneering? Yeah. Did we certainly bend some? Yep, sure did. But at the end of the day, I have a picture on my phone of two kids that are now in the United Kingdom that are not going to either live without their family, and Lord knows what's going to happen to them, or could potentially be dead. And, I can say that I helped a Marine get his translator out. I can say that, when, friends of mine called and said, hey, do you know this passcode for this gate? Because I'm really trying to get someone through. I could put them in touch with someone who did, right? Like in all of this and say, like, I could convince an American passport holder that if he went to the gate with his little brother, they were the only family they had, his brother was 15, they would get through even though his brother didn't have an SIV visa. Because he was going to stay in Afghanistan with his little brother and ride it out because he didn't think he could bring his little brother to America with him. Like, no. We've talked to this person. We've got you. Go to this place, ask for this person. Hold your passport up and hold them close as you push through, right? Like, these are the things that happen. And you want to know what, man? Like, and that's the thing that I think it's arrogance and apathy, or the two A's. And that's why I want to pump the current president's full of so much truth serum and be like, how is it that all of us figured this out? How is it that all of us just in panic mode, man? And like some of those group chats were just chaos. Like there's been some articles out there. I wasn't in this one, but one was like, hey, does anyone have a helicopter? And instead of being like, the fuck are you talking about? A helicopter, right? Like, fuck you. Like, they're like, well, let me see. You know what I'm saying? They're like, I don't think so, but let me see, right? Because, there's a couple of very low, like high value people that flew German commandos on little birds to land them and get them because those people mattered that much, right? The CIA, like the CIA had a second thing, and like certain people were like funneled there, and then there was a hotel that the Brits basically commandeered, and T2 SAS would bring people into the hotel saying that they were guests, and there's a back door into the airfield. Like there's all this like crazy, innovative. I mean, so one of the things we used to say in the Ranger Regiment is like you do all your rehearsals, and then something would change, you just have to go on mission. You just go, fuck it, we're doing it live. There was so much fuck it, we'll do it live, like. Right. And but then it's like, how is it that the people on the ground and people like me who just had these relationships that were willing to say they're a good dude, help them out, get it, but I'm still fighting but we've still got to fight the fucking government, and we've still got to like try and keep banging these drums to be like, please don't let 97% of a country that we spent 20 years in fall below the poverty line. Please don't let tens of thousands of people just starve to death or freeze to death in the winter. Like, I got plenty of problems with, certain facets of Afghan culture that makes me uncomfortable. We've talked about it. But at the end of the day, I'm still human. We're still all breathing the same air. And like you said, like you can disagree with things. It doesn't change the fact that there are so many good people in Afghanistan, even though you've never met them, even though you've never seen them, even though you have no idea who they are, that don't deserve the absolute unmitigated shit show that they're in the middle of. Would I like to smoke, like I said, pretty much all the Taliban senior government? Fuck yeah, man. Go grab me my blaster. Let me dial it in and line them all up. I got no click. Great. Let's go get a falafel. Okay, like done, dude. I can't even tell you how happy I would be if you could somehow magically make me the guy that pulls the trigger on Harkani. Like that dude's a fucking scumbag shit show.
Right.
But past these 20, 25 names that you can look up on Wikipedia that are running the country, like what about the millions of people that are there, right? Like they're just trying to live. It's the same thing. Like, I mean, just because you're in the city, like how many people that are living in your part of the country are mine and Omar that are just trying to get by? Yeah. They might be more blue on your side. They might be more red on mine, but people are just trying to get by. Just human. And to know that, I get to go home and pour myself a nice glass of bourbon and put my feet up, and I'm from Chicago, so I get to watch the Bears get the crap kicked out of them tonight.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thanks. And you want to know what? If I choose to, I don't have to think about this again. Just, or if I decide I don't want to watch the Bears and I just want to like play video games, whatever the fuck I want, because I live in America, because I won the fucking lottery when I was born to my parents in this country, and I have maximized that by working hard. Right. That's it. There's so many built-in competitive advantages to coming from here. So, but we forget that, and just it bothers me sometimes, man. Like you can hear it in my voice. Like it's just like it's not most of these people's fucking fault. Okay, it's not. So why are we going to pretend like it's somehow their fault because they have a shit government, which, by the way, we helped cause? Yeah. Sorry, that's the uncomfortable truth. We fucked up. President Biden is the president of the United States of America. He made a series of dumbass fucking decisions, okay? And it led us where it is. And because he's our president, because he's our representatives of the world, that means it's on us as a country. Sorry, hate him, love him, I don't give a fuck. That is the truth. So why are we just gonna like stick our heads so far into the ground it might as well be up our ass? Like, oh well, move to the sound of the help. I don't care. It's not a political thing to me. It's like, find a way to make this better. I'm not saying like we don't negotiate with terrorists. Bullshit and fuck off. In this case, we already have. We already did. Those motherfuckers with the outer corridor to get into Hamid Karzai Airport to let people through. Literally. So Jericho Denman, who wrote the New York Post article where he said like the gate looks like it's a one-way exit to the middle of a heavy metal death rock concert and the rock show's on fire. Like, right. I served with Denman. Like, just the way Curiosity Quirks worked out. He actually, for like 2 weeks of my trip all the way around the world, him and I were backpacking Eastern Europe together. So, I mean, I genuinely know him as a human being, right? Like, when they're saying it's that bad, right? And, and he's talking about how he has all these combat tours, which he did. That dude is a stone cold pipe hitter. That dude is just an amazing soldier. It's like it was weird. It said in the article, is it weird? He goes, I'm standing waiting for my guy right next to a Taliban dude who speaks English, just chatting it up.
Jesus.
Okay, like that's what, so fuck your rote bullshit about we don't do this or we don't do that. We already did that. We've already stop telling me about what we're supposed to do and all the movie fucking tropes that you assholes who know nothing about any of this are saying. And like, let's get to work trying to solve the problem. I don't know. And here's the next thing. Well, Tom, what do you do? I mean, one, I tell Taliban to get their fucking ass to Doha, and I start talking about $12 billion and what it's going to take to unfreeze it and make sure that we actually feed people, right? Like, start putting some conditions on the cash, start trying to ingratiate myself to lower mid-level subordinates who might not be as corrupted as fucking Sarjar Haqqani. Like, let's start there. Let's call the Brits back, which... let's call the Aussies, let's call the Canadians, let's call the French, let's call NATO and be like, yo, so our bad. We know we told all y'all motherfuckers to get the fuck out because we were getting the fuck out and we were the infrastructure, but let's figure out how we help. I'm not saying it's peacekeepers. I'm not saying like, or fuck, man, run it through the goddamn UN. Like, I know the UN's half of useless. You're in Manhattan. I don't need to explain that to you. Like, no. I know that on a lot of levels, the UN on some levels is tits on a board. But this is actually the one place where even the Chinese and the Russians aren't going to get in the way of it. Right? Like, it doesn't hurt anybody. I mean, shit, by the way, fun fact, 2 embassies are still running for the Taliban in Afghanistan. 2.
What do you say?
There's 2 embassies, 2 official recognition for the Taliban government. At least it was right when we left. And like everyone's like, we're not having diplomatic relations formally. 2 have them. Pakistan, you want to know who the other is? China.
What a surprise.
Because there's all the rare earth, all the chrome, the coridium and or whatever, like all that shit's there. Right. So like,
and China don't give a fuck about girls anyway.
Period. Like, so it's not like anyone's going to get in the way of it. So like, maybe let's like start walking this back. And by the way, if we can like get ingratiated and get some good graces in our thinking, maybe we can, I don't know, like counteract China. I mean,
and we'd rather, as much as we disagree and hate Taliban, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, we'd rather have Taliban than ISIS. We'd rather have people who are pragmatic and like, oh yeah, I love Allah, but like, oh, all right, I'll work with you. Give me some money.
So many things I disagree with them. I wouldn't even call them pragmatic, but it's the devil we know. It's the devil that we have 30, 40 years of tape on, that we've watched their evolution, that maybe if we listen to the experts, we might not repeat the same mistakes. We also have enough tape on this point on like ISIS and ISIS-K, and we know what those motherfuckers are going to do. They're going to fucking kill everything. Okay? Like, they're bringing the sword and they're bringing fire and all that Pol Pot paranoia, Cambodian, Kamaru shit. That's ISIS-K. Like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, go read up on some history and go imagine that. That is fucking ISIS-K. And Lord knows there's something else that's worse lurking behind the scenes if it gets too impoverished and because that's human history. What happens? There's nothing, something rises up because they're desperate. So maybe let's not do that. I mean, it's good humanitarian policy, and it's also like, color me the ultimate pragmatist. It's also good business. Like, this is the other thing about the administration that pisses me fuck off. I don't know what the downside is, other than having to admit you're wrong, which is something that this administration on this issue has shown an absolute inability and is incapable of saying. Not to say that the past administration was particularly good at saying, oops, my bad, I was wrong. Okay, like, again, let's have a level of honest brokership here.
Right.
But talking about this issue and talking about that guy, he's been wrong a lot, a ton, and he's never once said it. And the only thing I can come up with when I look at this is like, better do something. Oh, wait, shit, that would mean to start this, he's got to go, my bad. Like,
which I don't really, I mean, I know he's not going to watch the show because he doesn't like Latinx voices. But I'll give him, I really don't think, since there's such a disconnect between him listening to us, if he just sidestepped the press conference in general and just said, okay, here's a bunch of money, here's a bunch of, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And didn't even say a fucking word to us about it. Fine. You don't have to admit you're wrong, dum-dum. Just save the people and feed people.
I think that it's one of those things where it's like, say what you want, whether you like or dislike Jen Scott. She does a hell of a good job at her. She's a hell of a press secretary, just as far as her competency at her job. I don't always like what she's saying. I don't always like how she has like one of the greatest olays I've seen in a press secretary in a long time, but she's competent at her job. So, as much as I'd want to like shake her and pump her full of just as much truth serum and be like, what do you know too?
Right.
That plan could absolutely work. You could absolutely send someone who's that competent and that good of a political operator up on stage for a week and let her tap dance the Potomac two-step. Do it.
We meant to feed them and go back in the whole time. I don't know what you're talking about. Next question. That would be fine.
The line would be, here's my job. We made every earnest effort to work with senior and premier NGOs around the world and the United Nations, but we realized that their efforts have been lacking. And we have a responsibility to the world to ensure that humanity is as safe as possible. And therefore, we've decided to reopen diplomatic negotiations for aid for the people of Afghanistan.
That's the dirtiest politics shit. I love that. That's so. You're not a lawyer. I know you're not, but that's some sneaky, smelly shit, and I love it.
No, I'm worse than a lawyer. I'm in marketing and advertising, which means
car salesman shit. Oh my god! I used to do sales.
Lawyers can get their law card pulled. They can lose their bar. I'm just in advertising, marketing, public relations. You're not taking anything from me. Right. But it works, right? And that's the thing. Like, if you got to be that dirty and that slimy, and you've got to and Jen's better at it than I am. And I just came up with that off the top of my fucking head. I didn't even workshop that. Now give her fucking staff and everything. It's not like this is impossible. It's not like if some dumbass on a podcast who's been running his fucking suckhole for 2 hours can come up with that in 30 seconds. Imagine what she can do when she actually, takes the time to do it. Right? So do the damn thing. And this is the thing where it's like, you want to know what, for the people like, well, how much money is this going to cost us? Well, fuck off right now. How about we don't have a mass genocidal starvation event? Because it's our fault. Again, this is the thing that, I kind of talked around it, but I'll just say it explicitly. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with the leadership. The leadership represents you, represents us as Americans, represents our nation. Okay. So do you want to be on the wrong side of that history? That's what I don't understand by some people well, we should have been gone 10 years ago. We weren't. We should have done it. We didn't. It's not about what happened. It's what do you do right now? What is you said it, the American spirit, that cowboy shit that everyone did to save these people, that everyone agrees that's the best of America. Oh, great. So why don't we do it again? I'm sorry. Look, you've heard me. I've had how much smoke for the past 2 hours about the current administration? If I said anything positive, check the tape. I can't think of, right? Right. I'm the one person I did praise on that side of the aisle was the one dude that just flipped the bird to the Build Back, America better. He's of his people.
Right.
It's it doesn't matter. This is the situation we're in. These are the people that are representing us. So put the pressure on them to represent us the right way. Right. I'm not saying we go back and forever. I'm not saying that, after, we don't even find a way to look at the UN and be like, oh, by the way, we're going to foot the bill for the first 6 months, but you motherfuckers better have at least some quasi plan. Hey, UNICEF, come here. Go, like it isn't like you can't start the ball rolling. It isn't can't be like you can't go to like back to the UK, back to Canada, back to Australia, back to these other countries, because there is some mining capability in that country. Like there are things that make Afghanistan. Oh, by the way, total side note, but all the heroin that gets grown in Afghanistan, a lot of that doesn't come to the United States. It all goes to Europe. Okay, like that's all a European thing. Like there's this fascinating like counter drug insurgency that T2 SAS did, which we don't have time for, like how they were trying to combat that. So it's like, hey, Europe, we'll start this because we broke it for the first 6 months, but if you don't want that heroin flooding your market, like it's so bad there that friends of mine who are senior policy people, like in the United States government, we were wargaming the whataboutisms and what if of how much money would Putin offer the Afghan government to assure that Afghan opium didn't cross the border into Russia? Like, because they're the ones controlling it. So it's like, right. How much money does Putin like send his emissary and go, so I know it's all you got. And I'm prepared to be gracious, in that oligarchical, creepy Putin sort of way, KGB way.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you X cold hard American dollars to make sure that this bullshit never crosses my borders. Right. But if it does, I send my mercenaries and I don't bring the money next year. Like we are literally having this like actual conversation like on Signal, like how much money would it be? And it was like, because that's like the play here, right? Like that's the desperation, like that's the shit going on because the opium doesn't come here nearly as much as it goes to Europe. Right.
And and again, he's another example. Say what you will about his evilness. No one questions his competency.
No.
Okay. Everyone looks at Putin and goes like, at least he knows what the fuck he's doing. He may be a cunt, but he knows what the fuck he's doing.
Like it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Honestly, it's the same thing with the Clintons. It's the same thing of what whether you liked him or disliked him, what Trump was trying to accomplish. He told you what he was doing. These are like apples to kumquats to durian comparison. Right. Okay. Like I'm not trying. The only thing I'm trying to say is like these people and the people around them knew what they were doing. They told you. Whether you agreed or disagreed with it is irrelevant. They told you up front what was going on. You just had to have the discernment to listen to it.
And Biden is going the sky is orange. Next question. The sky is orange.
And that's actually the perfect way to put it. Probably the perfect way to wrap it. Like that's the problem with all of this. Is the sky is still fucking orange when everyone's like mistake, 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 and now you're representing me. And it's going to be a disaster in 2022. It's going to be a disaster in the midterm elections. Like, right. And not just Afghanistan, but you start looking, you're seeing this thread sort of being already woven through the first 2 years of this presidency. And it's just, again, it's not an attack against the man. It's an observation of the fact that, like, he just won't, like I would love to have been the fly on the wall of the Manchin conversations. Because there's no one just stands in the face of the fire and is, public enemy number one to an entire side of the political spectrum for this long, unless he actually was trying to accomplish something. Like that's just common sense. Like, he's a senior tenured member of Congress. I think he's like number 5 in the Democratic Party or something like that in the fucking Senate. He doesn't, you'd have to go back. I might be wrong on that last part, but it's like, he's not some junior motherfucker trying to make a name for himself. He's a senior, well-insulated member of Congress who it's part of the reason he can throw his weight around, right? Because he's like, oh, don't like it. I'm going to, you're going to come to the table for me.
Right.
But sure, he's fucking Satan and he's fucking trying to kill the planet and all this other fucking bullshit that your girl from your part of the world, AOC and Schumer.
Who I was thinking about this too. Who represents Queens? Bitch, have you ever been to Queens? Nobody in Queens wants this like perfect, leftist utopia of like just everyone with Marxism beards and like like that's not Queens, motherfucker. That's not Queens.
Queens is spicy, man. Just because you said that you're also Puerto Rican, like my buddy's wife was Puerto Rican from Queens, and that temper, like she was so sweet. She was such a right up until the point where he no
right.
I mean, and then she'd cool off. And she'd, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Like it's one of those things where it's like you hear that cliche, and I'm like, that can't be real. Like cliches exist for a reason. And Carla would tell you, by the way, she'd be like, oh, she's like, I'm Rican from Queens. What you want? Like,
right. They'll cook for you. They'll take care of you, but they have a knife on them somewhere.
Even if it's their tongue, because I got a pretty sharp one, but dude, that girl, oh, love her.
Yeah, we've been talking fucking forever, but I think I would love to have you come back at some point, because I especially after reading Rob O'Neill's book and hearing you guys talk about, and you have especially talked about the transitioning out of service and how we dropped the ball with that with a lot of service members. And I'd love to kind of maybe get into that at some point with you. But for now, thank you for spending the time with me, sir.
Dude, this was a blast, Peter. Anytime you want me, like I'm literally putting all my contact information in the chat. So you anytime, brother, this was fun.
Thank you. I'm glad. And before, please talk about the 20-year war one more time, please.
Yeah. So 20yearwar.com. It's the photo journal that I put together along with myself, another former Army Ranger, Dan Blakely, and his childhood best friend, Bo Simmons. It's the unique story it's a coffee table book. It's 12 inches by 12 inches. It's huge. And it's portraits of veterans as, in their current life, what they're doing. And it's a story of what inspired them to enlist, what they did in the service, what their transition was like, and what they're doing now to continue to serve this country and be a part of the second greatest generation. It was awesome. It was just an amazing experience. And it's a really good snapshot where people are like, who is a veteran, right? What do they do? You get this bullshit of we're either PTSD time bombs, we're Captain America throwing out the first pitch at the ball game, or we're, and the truth is we're neither of those things. We are a bunch of unique, confident, capable individuals, and we're hardworking, and we're from all over this great country of ours. And we tried to, put that flavor together. Bo, to capture the photographs, drove across 42 different states and 16,000 miles to capture these stories and capture these photos. And,
they're beautiful pictures too. They're really, really nice.
Okay. He's telling. So if you want a snapshot of who the American veteran is, 20yearwar.com. I highly encourage you guys to pick up a copy and take a look.
Awesome. And is there anything else you'd like to plug?
No, just don't be a douche. I would say the general lifestyle. That's one of my life mottos. And since we're talking about it, and since, we're having an honest conversation, it's okay to admit that, whatever the opposite flavor is, isn't Satan. And, that sometimes your guy or gal didn't quite stick the landing. So don't be a douche. Like you said, it's okay not, your shirt says it's okay to disagree about politics, and keep having conversations like this. And
you can buy this. You can buy this at peterfeliciano.com, by the way. Everybody.
I'm actually gonna have to go buy one of those, because that I can't. No, I'm serious. That shirt is like my life. Literally, because no one. We're going away. I don't care. Okay. One of my favorite questions to ask when someone gets super, super on one side or the other, I'm like, show me the politician that you agree with 100%. Like, what? I'm like 100%. Everything you're like, and exactly, it's like it's a perfect 0 for 0, right. And it's like, okay, so if this is now the rock upon which we will build this discussion, I'm not saying that some people don't have deal breakers for you, okay? Mm-hmm. Like Omar or AOC or Schumer talking about flat out socialism, Bernie Sanders. I'm like, nope, you have crossed a Rubicon. I don't want to hear about Iceland and Denmark and all these places that are 96% or better homogeneous. Okay, right. There's a reason that America's complicated, and part of it is because the way you look and the way I look historically had friction. And in order to resolve that friction,
cultural a lot of it too. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in this tiny little country, tiny little island of Iceland, where everybody knows everyone and everybody looks the same, it's a little easier. Okay,
right.
Let's just have that, so. So if this is where we're gonna have the conversation, then let's start there. Let's start talking about our differences and why they are healthy. Why is America the greatest nation in the world? Is because, and this is actually one of the things I love about the book, and you really see it come out. America means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. Radically different. The kid that grew up in the slums in the urban area of Philadelphia is going to have a very different perspective than the kid who grew up on the Native American reservation up in South Dakota that I just drove through a couple of weeks ago, who's going to have a very different opinion from like I did growing up in the upper middle class. And the neighborhood that I grew up in, West Dundee, Illinois, think it was 2015, Good Morning America, you can look this up, named the neighborhood I grew up in the most Americana neighborhood in the United States. Okay, literally, I swear to God, like it drove me nuts, but Ward Cleaver could have lived down the block and you never would have known. Okay, so you think, and then you're like you said, you're in Manhattan. You think you and I grew up the same way? Right. Hell no. You think, but guess what? We both love this country. We both want it to be better, just like most people do. But it means different things to different people, and that's where you've got to come together. And honestly, like if you want to read about the veteran experience, but you also want to see a really great snapshot of just America, that we were able, thankfully, to sort of cover that in the book, and I'm really grateful for that.
Awesome. Make sure you subscribe, everybody, wherever you're listening. I love you all very, very much. And you can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. What's your social media, sir?
So it's at Tommy Amenta on Instagram and on Twitter. And then Tom Amenta, if you go to Facebook, I don't know why you would do that. And honestly, just not happening. But yeah, that's where I am. And I'm not super like the older I've gotten, because we can talk about this too. At Ranger Up, we really pioneered like how to use social media to like sell shit. And this was before like Facebook, or I'm sorry, is it Meta, whatever they're calling it, like really tight the algorithm to create the echo chamber. So I can give the TED talk of like where that started, where it is now, and like how I can't stand TikTok because they're about to do the same thing, but that's another story for another time. Right. So I'm not super like always on my socials anymore. I try and like keep just a little nibble and just a little morsel on that. But yeah, you can find that.
Okay, but at the very least, they can go to 20yearwar.com.
20yearwar.com, and then United, and we are unitedvalor.com, sort of like the parent company, which is where our podcast is, talking about we get deep and long form with different veteran experiences and different veteran stories. So you can find it there too, or on Spotify. Never Left Behind.
Yeah, Never Left Behind. Yes, sir. Yep. All right, I will go ahead and end the podcast and the recording. Thank you, everybody. Bye.